My head was pounding. When I opened my eyes, I found myself lying on a heated brick bed under a thick quilt. Across from me lay a woman with a flushed face like a spring peach blossom. I was completely stunned. Just yesterday, I was the commander-in-chief of the Red Dragon Special Forces Brigade in the Northeast Military Region. Suddenly, a flood of unfamiliar memories rushed into my mind. I realized I had time-traveled back to the Lesser Kingan Range in May 1960. The original owner of this body shared my name, Mengye, and was an orphan. Last night, after a village dinner where we both drank too much, I gave my neighbor, Li Shumei, a ride home. She was 21, just 3 years older than me, and lived a tragic life as a village widow. Sold to her husband for 3 pounds of cornmeal, her husband died right after the wedding, before they even entered the bridal chamber. Though she remained faithful, the villagers offered her terrible marriage prospects, and she had lost all hope. I checked under the covers and saw that we were both fully clothed. Just then, Li Shumei woke up and gasped in panic, pulling the quilt around herself. She worried her reputation would be ruined if anyone found out we slept on the same bed. Looking at her, I made a serious offer. "Sister Shumei, how about I marry you and take responsibility for you?" She was stunned by my words. Before she could process it, the wooden gate creaked open. It was Hu Biao, the corrupt village warehouse keeper, known for stealing public supplies and hiding behind his powerful uncle in the county town. He walked right in, ignoring my presence by the wall, and tried to grope Li Shumei. When she rejected him, he persisted, bragging that even the village chief couldn't stop him. As he reached for her again, I grabbed his wrist tightly. Realizing I was already in the room, Hu Biao grew furious and accused Li Shumei of being unfaithful. When he raised his hand to slap her, I kicked him hard in the abdomen. He curled up like a shrimp and flew backward into the wardrobe with a loud bang. Hu Biao spat blood, grabbed a fire poker, and swung it at my head. I easily dodged his clumsy attack, grabbed his wrist, and twisted it forcefully. He screamed like a slaughtered pig as sweat poured down his face. I kicked him in the butt and warned him that if he ever harassed Li Shumei again, I would break his middle leg. Terrified, Hu Biao threatened revenge and ran off. When I checked on Li Shumei, she was flustered and asked me to fetch firewood from the courtyard. But as soon as I stepped outside, she locked the door behind me. I heard her sobbing from inside. She told me she could not agree to marry me because she was a widow, and being together would ruin my reputation. She even threatened to hang herself if I did not leave. Realizing she was too overwhelmed, I comforted her, reminded her that I would protect her from Hu Biao, and decided to give her some space. I walked back to my house and was shocked by what I saw. The mud house was terribly dilapidated, leaning so severely that 2 thick wooden sticks held up the south wall. The fence was falling apart, and the large vegetable garden was completely overgrown with dead weeds. I cursed the original owner's laziness in my heart. Inside, the living conditions were just as bad. My stomach rumbled with hunger, but after searching the entire house, I only found half a rock-hard piece of fossilized cornbread. The original owner was so poor he was practically urinating blood. Knowing I needed food to survive, I looked toward the vast mountains behind the house. As a former Special Forces soldier, wilderness survival and hunting were second nature to me, and back in the 1960s, hunting was still allowed. I sharpened a rusty old sickle on a stone, grabbed an earthen basket, and headed into the deep forest. After walking for 10 minutes, I spotted a bush filled with tender green wild buds, eager to harvest my first meal from the wild. I harvested the tender, delicious thorny buds with my sickle and tossed them into my basket. Suddenly, a rustling noise broke the silence of the forest. I crouched low in the bushes, and a large wild gray wolf stepped into view. Instead of being afraid, I felt excited for the chance to get fresh meat. The hungry wolf caught my scent and pounced. I leaped from the bushes to strike with my sickle, but the agile beast dodged. It circled me briefly before lunging again in a desperate rage. Though my mind was sharp, my undernourished body was a second too slow. Its sharp claws ripped through my worn sleeve, leaving 3 painful bloody scratches on my left arm. Ignoring the pain, I drove the sickle deep into its belly, tearing a massive gash. The wolf howled, collapsed, and quickly died. After gutting it on the spot, I carried the 100-pound carcass back down the mountain. When I entered the village, a crowd quickly gathered around me in awe. Some villagers assumed I had merely stumbled upon a wounded wolf, while others offered to buy meat from me. I politely declined, wanting to keep the food for myself. As I walked away, the villagers discussed how severe the local famine was and warned each other about a wild bear reported in the area. Meanwhile, Hu Biao was at the village warehouse scheme with a local woman. Wanting to force Li Shumei into submission, he offered the woman extra cornmeal to spread rumors that Li Shumei and I were involved in a scandalous affair. I returned to my dilapidated house, which was so empty that even a mouse would leave in tears. I spent over half an hour scrubbing a thick layer of rust off the old iron pot. After boiling water, I poured it over the wolf to easily scrape off its fur with my knife blade. Since I had no seasonings, I simply stewed the meat in plain water. Soon, a rich aroma of meat filled the kitchen, promising a satisfying meal. I sat by the stove, watching the fire cook the firm wolf meat, reflecting on my past life as a 50-year-old single soldier who dedicated everything to the country. I resolved to build a better life for myself this time, with a wife, children, and a comfortable home. Remembering a villager's comment that the dead wolf looked like it had recently given birth, I realized there might be wolf cubs on the mountain. Raising a cub would give me a fierce, loyal hunting companion, especially since I trained military dogs in my previous life. Excited by the idea, I loaded the stove with firewood and rushed back to where I killed the wolf. When I arrived, a large flock of hungry crows was picking at the leftover entrails. To my dismay, I saw that the crows had already killed 3 wolf cubs and were viciously pecking at the last surviving one. Instead of scattering when I approached, the desperate crows turned on me, screeching madly. I charged in with a wooden stick, knocking the birds away as they swooped down. The leader of the flock, a huge raven, lunged at my face and grazed my cheek, leaving a bloody scratch. Enraged, I smashed the bird with my stick, killing it instantly. With their leader dead, the rest of the flock scattered in panic. I scooped up the wounded, unconscious cub and hurried back home, leaving the inedible crow carcasses behind. I placed the cub on the heated bed, wrapped it in old clothes, and applied crushed mugwort to its injuries to heal them. With the cub secure, I went to check on the stewed wolf meat. Lifting the pot lid, a wonderful aroma filled the air. Finding no plates or bowls in the bare dish rack, I grabbed 2 old chopsticks and ate directly from the pot, seasoning the meat with a bit of coarse salt. After satisfying my hunger, I evaluated my priorities. I urgently needed to rebuild my dilapidated home, buy basic household supplies, and acquire a hunting rifle. To afford all this, I decided to go back up the mountain early tomorrow morning to hunt for more wild game to sell to the villagers. Since I could not finish the entire pot of cooked wolf meat myself, I cut off a thigh to bring to Li Shumei. As I stepped out of my yard, a group of village children quickly surrounded me, drawn by the delicious smell. I cut off a few pieces of meat and distributed them to the children, who eagerly devoured them and licked the oil from their hands. I told them I had to give the remaining thigh away, but promised to share more meat with them next time. Meanwhile, the local villagers gathered to chat after dinner. Aunt Chen, the woman involved with Hu Biao, gleefully spread false rumors to the crowd. She claimed Hu Biao had caught Li Shumei and me lying naked together on her heated brick bed. The village women quickly joined in, condemning Li Shumei as unchaste. However, village chief Meng Guoqing, a relative who had helped me growing up, overheard the gossip and angrily scolded the women for spreading rumors. Even so, he was furious with me, believing I had acted recklessly. Unaware of the commotion, I arrived at Li Shumei's house. Spotting me from her yard, she panicked, dropped her hoe, and ran inside to lock the door. I knocked gently and told her I had brought a warm wolf leg for her. She refused from behind the door, telling me to leave and insistence that she did not want my food. Realizing she would not open the door while I was there, I placed the wolf leg on her doorstep. I called out to her, warning that leaving the meat outside for too long would attract flies, and then walked away. Once she heard me leave, Li Shumei opened the door a crack. She was stunned by the massive size of the wolf thigh, especially during such a severe famine. After a moment of hesitation, she took the meat inside her home. Having nothing else to do and lacking any modern electronics at home, I decided to take a stroll around the village. On my way, I stopped by the local supply and marketing cooperative. Having heard so much about these cooperative stores from my elders in the past, I was curious to see one for myself. Inside, the shop was filled with traditional goods, sugar scales, and vintage posters. An old man with graying hair named Grandpa Lee stood behind the counter, serving a customer. As soon as he noticed me, his friendly demeanor vanished. Mistaking me for a thief, he threw a bundle of broom handles at me and tried to slap my face. I instinctively caught his wrist and twisted it, causing him to cry out in pain. I quickly let go and apologized, explaining that I was not there to steal food. I told Grandpa Lee that I wanted to buy a gun so I could go hunting in the mountains to earn money and repair my falling house. Surprised, he warned me that hunting during this severe famine was extremely dangerous, as starving wild animals were attacking humans and entering nearby villages. He advised me to ask the village chief for an honest job instead. When I mentioned that I had already hunted a wolf that day, he dismissed it as boasting. However, he did share some useful news. The county town recently issued a policy allowing the supply and marketing cooperative to purchase meat from hunters at 20% above the market price. This was incredible news for my future plans. I asked him again about buying a gun. Grandpa Lee explained that the store had no firearms in stock because very few villagers knew how to hunt. Instead, he gave me the names of several local villagers who owned old rifles left over from the war against the Japanese, suggesting I try buying one from them. I thanked Grandpa Lee and walked back to my house, but as soon as I arrived at my doorstep, I realized something was wrong. A small straw stick I had placed in the crack of the door to detect intruders had fallen to the ground, and there were unfamiliar footprints at the entrance. Realizing someone had been inside, I quickly rushed into the house. I returned home to find my pot of cooked wolf meat completely stolen, even the broth. Inspecting the clear footprints left in the courtyard, I deduced the thief was a woman in her 30s or 40s with a limp or an ankle injury. I decided not to chase her immediately, knowing she would pay for it later. As I pondered, the wild wolf cub darted toward the door. I blocked it with my foot, and the angry cub tried to bite my calf, only to fall from its injuries. I picked it up, placed it inside an old iron cage from the yard, and threw in a few of my old cotton coats. Letting the cub adapt to my scent was a proven police dog training technique I learned in my past life. The cub gradually calmed down, and I fell into a deep sleep. Late at night, a wild bear invaded our quiet village, breaking down a wooden door and killing a yard dog with a single swat. The homeowner screamed in terror, waking the entire village. Men armed with weapons and torches rushed out, alongside the militia regiment led by Wang Jun. The villagers surrounded the house. Someone accidentally fired a gunshot, startling the bear into running out. In the panic, the militia opened fire, but poor marksmanship and the bear's thick fat layer meant the bullets only enraged the beast. The bear charged furiously, scattering the crowd and hurting several villagers. Militia leader Wang Jun knelt directly in the bear's path, taking aim at its head for a fatal shot. But just as the bear closed in, his gun trigger jammed completely. Realizing he was seconds away from death, Wang Jun gave a bitter laugh. Right at that critical moment, I rushed forward and kicked the bear hard in the head, altering its charge and saving his life. After saving Wang Jun from the charging beast, I helped him to his feet and requested his gun. He hesitated, urging me to return home for my own safety. As the bear turned to attack us again, I quickly snatched the rifle from his hands and kicked him out of harm's way. I cleared the jammed shell with a swift, experienced pull of the bolt. Wang Jun watched in complete shock as I handled the weapon with the flawless precision of a seasoned soldier. Aiming carefully, I pulled the trigger. The first bullet struck the bear directly in its left eye. The wounded beast roared in pain and lunged forward, but my second shot hit its neck. Blood gushed from the wound, sending the panicked creature fleeing into the village. My gun ran out of bullets, so I pulled the short blade from Wang Jun's belt and gave chase on foot. The blind, bleeding bear crashed into a yard, smashing through a front door. To my horror, I realized it had entered Li Shumei's house. Inside, Li Shumei was hiding under her covers in utter terror, listening to the heavy footsteps enter her room. Fearing her life was over, she closed her eyes and waited for the end. At that exact moment, I burst into the room. I lunged forward and drove the short blade straight into the bear's throat, severing its windpipe. The massive mountain of a beast let out a final, suffocating gasp and collapsed heavily to the floor, dead. With the threat eliminated, I walked over to the bed and gently pulled back the quilt. Li Shumei screamed in terror before realizing it was me. Seeing her shivering with swollen red eyes, I tenderly wiped away her tears, set her head on the pillow, and covered her safely with the blanket. Moments later, heavy footsteps echoed outside as Wang Jun and the militia rushed into the house. Seeing the dead bear on the floor, Wang Jun and the militia stood in complete disbelief. I made a shushing gesture, pointing to Li Shumei sleeping on the bed, and led everyone outside. When Wang Jun asked how I managed to kill the bear alone, I modestly claimed it was just good luck, which made the rest of the armed militia blush with embarrassment, since their entire group could not stop the beast. Wang Jun acknowledged that the carcass belonged to me, but I knew the militia had risked their lives and used up ammunition. I offered a generous three-way split. 1/3 for myself, 1/3 shared among the militia who fought that night, and the remaining third given to the village chief to stew for all the villagers. I only asked to keep the bear bile and sternum for myself. Overjoyed by my generosity, Wang Jun and the militia praised me, and someone even offered to introduce me to his 18-year-old sister-in-law. After they carried the bear to the brigade headquarters, I stayed behind to keep watch over Li Shumei. Morning light filled the room, and Li Shumei slowly woke up. Seeing me sitting against the wall, she pinched her arm to make sure she was not dreaming. Realizing I had saved her from the bear, she wept with gratitude and emotion. When I woke up, I found her staring at me through tears. Panicking, I quickly reassured her that I had stayed fully clothed all night. She burst into laughter, wiped her tears, and insisted on cooking me breakfast. 10 minutes later, she served cornmeal porridge, 4 eggs, and the wolf meat I had brought her yesterday. She peeled an egg and handed it to me, which I ate happily. As I ate, Li Shumei watched me closely, suddenly remembering the quiet vow she had made to herself before facing death last night. Her cheeks flushed bright red with embarrassment. Noticing her reaction, I teased her and asked why her face was so red. Blushing deeply, she let out an embarrassed cry and ran out of the room in a panic. Li Shumei brought out fresh dandelions with soybean paste for us to enjoy. As a Northeasterner, I consider dandelions with dipping sauce an absolute spring essential. Before I could chat with her further, Wang Jun arrived at the house. He urged me to come to the entrance of the supply and marketing cooperative, where Grandpa Li was preparing to slaughter the bear I had killed the night before. Li Shumei was shocked to learn how massive the bear was and realized the grave danger I had faced to save her. Tears welled up in her eyes as her feelings for me deepened. To avoid village gossip, she decided to stay behind and clean up first, rather than walk with me publicly. Before leaving, I reminded her to bring a large basin later, so she could receive a share of the meat. When Wang Jun and I approached the supply and marketing cooperative, a massive crowd of villagers had already gathered. Many were skeptical that an 18-year-old like me could take down a mountain-sized bear on my own. However, Zhu Zi, a member of the militia team, stood up and defended me fiercely. He explained to the crowd how I saved their captain, shot the bear twice with amazing precision, and ultimately slit its throat inside Li Shumei's yard. Though Aunt Chen tried to undermine my achievement with bitter comments, most villagers ignored her habitual gossiping. Village Chief Manhwa then addressed the crowd, confirming that I had indeed killed the bear. He announced my decision to share 1/3 of the bear meat with the entire village so everyone could enjoy a decent meal during this harsh famine. Hearing this, the villagers erupted in enthusiastic cheers, praising my generosity and calling me a hero. As Wang Jun and I walked through the parted crowd, the villagers showered me with compliments. I felt a bit embarrassed by all the praise, but I knew this was a necessary step to completely overturn the original owner's bad reputation and earn the community's respect. Grandpa Li walked out of the supply and marketing cooperative with a pig slaughtering knife, laughing heartily as he greeted me. After sharpening the blade on a stone, he expertly skinned and butchered the massive bear in under 5 minutes. Once the bear was cut, Grandpa Lee asked what I planned to do with the valuable parts. I told him I would keep the bear bile and 2 paws for myself, then asked if the store would buy the bear skin and the remaining pair of paws. Grandpa Lee offered me 30 yuan for the skin and 60 yuan for the 2 bear paws. The villagers gasped at the total price of 90 yuan, which was more than half a year's income for most people in our village. Grandpa Lee divided the bear meat into 3 portions. My share was the largest, consisting of 2 hind legs and half a set of ribs, while the rest was split between the militia and the village. Village Chief Mengguo Qing ordered Hu Biao to take the village's portion to the warehouse so it could be stewed for everyone to enjoy at dinner. With the help of a militiaman, I carried my share of the bear meat home. Smelling the raw meat, the little wolf cub in the cage stood up and growled. I cut off a small piece and fed it, but ignored its demands for more. Knowing my house was prone to break-ins, I decided to store the meat safely. I twisted hemp ropes together, tied up the bear meat, and hung it inside an old underground vegetable cellar in my yard. In the cool May climate of the Lesser Khingan Range, the meat would stay fresh there for weeks. After securing my food, I picked up half of the bear ribs and headed toward Li Xiaomei's house. But as I approached her gate, I heard a loud commotion. Aunt Chen and several village women were standing outside her doorstep, hurling vulgar insults and calling her a shameless slut for supposedly seducing younger men. Furious at their harsh words, I ran up and shouted at the crowd to stop. Aunt Chen and the other women looked guilty when they saw me, but quickly pulled me aside to whisper rumors. She claimed Li Xiaomei was cursed, brought bad luck to her late husband, and had loose morals with men climbing her wall at night. I mocked Aunt Chen for spouting nonsense, which sent her into a furious rage. The other women held her back, reminding her that I had just killed a bear with my bare hands. When I teased her again, she lunged at me like a mad dog, before her friends dragged her away, warning me that I would end up dead, just like Niu II. Inside the house, Li Xiaomei was leaning against the window with red eyes, having heard every word. My protective words warmed her long-frozen heart. When I knocked on the window frame, she startled, lost her footing, and fell onto the heated bed with a cry of pain. I rushed inside and saw her clutching her ankle. Ignoring her protests, I pulled up her trouser leg and grabbed her ankle in a firm, commanding tone. I began massaging the injury gently yet firmly to treat the sprain. In the middle of the massage, she blushed deeply and gasped that I was pinching the wrong place. I realized my hand had accidentally slipped onto her calf. I chuckled, adjusted my position, and continued massaging her ankle for 10 minutes until she could move it without pain. I instructed her to avoid heavy labor for a few days to prevent habitual sprains. I then handed her the bear ribs I brought. She tried to refuse, suggesting I sell the meat to the supply and marketing cooperative to make money. I insisted she keep it, explaining that bear meat was nutritious and would help her ankle heal faster. As she smiled sweetly at me, I was captivated by her simple, radiant, and natural beauty. Li Xiaomei blushed deeply as I complimented her beauty, but she felt happy inside. When I asked for the time, she checked her watch and told me it was 9:30. I explained that I needed to head into the mountains to hunt and make money to repair my collapsing house. Li Xiaomei offered to give me her savings, but I refused, telling her that a grown man should earn his own living. She warned me to be careful, and I headed out with my sickle. I returned to the mountain ridge where I previously killed the wolf. Along the way, I harvested a basket full of thorny shoots and wild monkey-leg ferns. Just as I was getting ready to turn back, I heard an animal running through the leaves. I squatted low, aware that dangerous beasts roamed these woods. A roe deer bounded toward me, stopping just 5 meters away. I lunged out of the bushes with my sickle, but a loud gunshot echoed through the forest before I could strike. A bullet grazed my cheek, leaving a bloody cut. I immediately dodged into a forward roll and hid back in the bushes while the startled roe deer fled. A voice called out from nearby, asking if I was still alive. An old man cautiously approached my hiding spot. When he was 2 meters away, I leaped out to disarm him with a punch. He used his shotgun barrel to block my fist, knocking us both back. The old man turned out to be an experienced hunter named Third Master Chen. He assured me he had no bad intentions and handed me his gun to prove it was unchambered. I introduced myself as Meng Ye from Meng Family Gully and explained that I needed money to repair my house and get married. Impressed by my courage, Third Master invited me to his mountain cabin for a drink to calm my nerves and apologize for the near miss. I accepted his invitation, but before we left, he smiled and told me to wait a moment, hinting that we might get an unexpected harvest. Curious about Third Master Chen's instructions, I squatted beside him in the bushes. Just a few minutes later, the very same roe deer that had been frightened by the gunshot came wandering back to see what had happened. Third Master fired his hunting rifle instantly, dropping the deer. He explained that roe deer earned the nickname silly roe deer because their endless curiosity always drives them back to investigate danger. Third Master bled and gutted the deer on the spot. He taught me that bleeding prevents the meat from tasting gamey and stops predators from tracking the blood trail to your home. Gutting the animal right away is an ancient hunter custom that leaves a tribute for the mountain god and other hungry creatures. Filled with respect for his wisdom, I hoisted the heavy deer onto my back to carry it for him. As we walked through the deep forest, Third Master shared important mountain customs and tracking techniques with me. After half an hour, we reached an underground shelter called a diyinzi, covered with dry grass for insulation and protection against wild animals. We climbed down into the simple subterranean room, which was filled with various animal furs hanging on the walls. I helped Third Master skin the roe deer and stir-fry it with the wild monkey leg ferns I had gathered. 2 hours later, we sat together around the stove for a feast. The roe deer meat was delicious, far superior to wolf or bear, with a tender texture and a subtle milky flavor. Third Master explained that roe deer feed on wild medicinal herbs, making their meat highly nourishing. He added that the roe deer skin, known as baikao dan, was its most valuable part because it could keep a hunter warm even on top of frozen snow. We hit it off like old friends, enjoying our food and drinks. Curious about his lifestyle, I asked why he lived alone in an underground shelter deep in the mountains instead of returning to a village. Hearing my question, Third Master's cheerful smile instantly froze, and he took a long, heavy breath. Third Master Chen rolled a tobacco leaf, took a deep drag, and shared his painful past. 2 years ago, while he was sick with a fever, his son went into the mountains to hunt game to make him soup. His son never returned. When Third Master went searching, he found his son torn apart below the armpits, surrounded by clover-shaped footprints and a severed tiger tail. Devastated, Third vowed to avenge his son. He moved into the deep mountains to track the beast. A year later, he spotted a Siberian tiger missing its tail near a cliff. He shot at it, but only hit its rear before it escaped. He warned me to be extremely cautious, as that hungry, ferocious tiger was still roaming the forest. I listened attentively and secretly resolved to hunt down that broken-tailed tiger myself to fulfill Third Master's wish. As I prepared to leave, Third Master stopped me and insisted I take half of the roe deer meat to nourish my thin body. He also unwrapped a small cloth bag and presented me with a finely crafted, heavy hunting dagger with a black hardwood handle. When I tried to refuse such a valuable gift, he cut me off and insisted I keep it. He then asked me to bring him some coarse salt when I returned in a few days so he could cure meat. I thanked Third Master, took the roe deer meat and the sharp dagger, and headed back down the mountain. Returning home, I fed a piece of roe deer meat to the wild wolf cub. Though it still growled when I tried to pet its back, it focused on eating, showing signs of becoming accustomed to me. After hanging the rest of the roe deer meat in my cool vegetable cellar, I went to Li Xiumei's house. I offered to take her to the brigade headquarters to eat the communal bear meat, but she gently refused, worried that village gossip would ruin our reputations before our relationship was official. Respecting her decision, I walked to the brigade headquarters alone. As I approached, I saw a massive crowd gathered outside, ranging from elderly folks to young children, all eagerly waiting for the feast. The entire village gathered at the brigade headquarters, eagerly waiting for the bear meat feast. In these harsh famine years, meat was an incredible luxury. Spotting me in the crowd, The villagers respectfully parted to let me walk to the front. Militia. Leader Wang Jun lifted the pot lid, releasing a rich, mouth-watering aroma. He scooped out the largest piece of tender bear meat and handed it to me first, honoring my effort in taking down the beast. As I ate, I noticed something was wrong. I remembered Grandpa Lee specifically setting aside the bear's neck for the village portion, but it was nowhere to be seen in the pot. When I pointed this out, Wang Jin and Grandpa Lee confirmed my suspicion. The crowd erupted in anger, demanding to know who stole their food. Village Chief Meng Guoqing searched the crowd and noticed Hu Biao slipping away behind a woodpile. Wang Jun and a few militiamen quickly chased him down and brought him back. Hu Biao loudly denied stealing anything, but another militiaman arrived, carrying a sack containing the missing bear neck, catching Hu Biao red-handed. Cornered, Hu Biao broke into tears, falsely claiming he stole the meat to make bone soup for his paralyzed mother. Seeing his dramatic display, many sympathetic villagers pleaded with the village chief to forgive him. The village chief decided to let the matter go, with just a formal demerit on Hu Biao's record. I caught Hu Biao hiding a smug, deceitful smile as he bowed in gratitude. With the thief caught, Wang Jun restored order and instructed everyone to line up. Each villager received 2 pieces of bear meat and a bowl of rich broth. People happily took their food, either eating it on the spot or carrying it home to share. As I looked around the crowd, I noticed Aunt Chen finish her soup and begin showing off a pair of new cloth shoes to the other women. I noticed Aunt Chen showing off a new pair of old Beijing cloth shoes with white slats and black uppers. Looking closely at the unique tread pattern on her soles, I recognized them immediately. I approached her and pointed out that her shoe prints matched the footprints left by the thief who broke into my house yesterday and stole my meat. Panicked, Aunt Chen blurted out a defense, accidentally admitting that she was the one who stole my wolf meat. Catching her in her own lie, I threatened to report her crime to Wang Jun, reminding her that local authorities were cracking down hard on theft. Terrified of losing everything, Aunt Chen begged for mercy, admitting she and her family had already eaten the wolf meat and fed the bones to their dogs. Since she could not afford the 10 yuan replacement cost, Aunt Chen offered valuable information in exchange for a discount. She confessed that Hu Biao was behind the smear campaign against Li Xiumei. He instructed Aunt Chen to paint Li Xiumei as an unchaste woman so no one else would marry her, leaving her vulnerable for him to take over. Furthermore, she revealed that Hu Biao was actively planning to use his uncle's political connections in the county town to harm me. Hearing this, my face turned cold, and my heart filled with murderous intent toward Hu Biao. Terrified by my intense glare, Aunt Chen trembled in fear. I agreed to drop the matter of the stolen wolf meat, but warned her harshly that, if I ever caught her spreading rumors again, I would tear her mouth apart. Pale and soaked in sweat, she nodded frantically. Leaving her behind, I walked over to the supply and marketing cooperative. I spent 25 yuan buying essential household supplies, including clothes, rice, oil, and salt, as well as skin cream and oil pills as gifts for Li Xiumei. As Grandpa Li packed my items into net bags, I asked him where I could purchase bricks near our village. Shocked by my question, Grandpa Li asked if I was planning to build a new house. Grandpa Li told me that building a tile-roofed brick house would cost 200 to 300 yuan at the brick factory near Hongqi Forest Farm. Relieved that it was affordable, I bade him farewell. The surrounding villagers watched with deep envy as I carried my purchases home, sparking arguments among themselves about hunting in the mountains. I walked over to Li Xiumei's house and pushed the door open, only to catch her wearing just a red belly band. Embarrassed, she threw a pillow at me and told me to get out. I stepped outside, grinning, and waited until she finished dressing. When she called me back in, her cheeks were bright red. I teased her gently, which made her blush even more. I took out the herbal tea cream and oil pills I bought for her. Though she initially tried to refuse them as too expensive, I held her hand and placed them in her palm, pointing out how cracked her hands were from the harsh spring wind. Moved by my care, she accepted the gifts with tears of gratitude. Her past was filled with hardship. An abusive, alcoholic father who sold her, followed by the sudden death of her husband right after their wedding. My presence brought a long-lost warmth to her heart. When I teased that we were family now, she playfully shoved me out the door to stop village gossip. I carried my groceries back to my dilapidated house and lit a candle. Suddenly, I realized the room was unusually quiet without the wolf cub's usual growls. Looking over at the cage, I was horrified to see the cub's head stuck tightly between the wire bars. His face was turning purple, and his eyes were rolling back. I rushed forward, bent the wire mesh with my bare hands, and pulled the suffocating cub out. After slapping its head twice with no response, I laid it on its back on the heated bed and began chest compressions. I pressed 10 times, then 20 times, but the cub still showed no sign of life. Desperate to save my future hunting companion, I took a deep breath and gave the wolf cub mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. After I performed CPR and blew air into its lungs, the wolf cub's eyes slowly opened. It rolled on the ground, struggling to stand. Realizing the iron cage was too dangerous, I decided not to lock it inside again, letting it rest on the floor while I went back to sleep. As soon as I fell asleep, the restless cub tried to climb onto my bed to attack me, but the edge was too high. Giving up on that, it wandered over to the cozy-looking stove pit and crawled inside. Seconds later, a horrific scream woke me up as the cub darted out covered in dust and sparks. I quickly grabbed a bare broom handle and smacked it until the flames were extinguished. The cub collapsed, pouting with burnt, messy fur. Regretting bringing this foolish creature home, I blocked the stove pit with a wooden board so it wouldn't try to crawl in again. Later that night, the cub tried to escape through the crack of my old front door. It pushed its head through, but the elastic band snapped the heavy door shut, trapping its head tightly. Screaming in pain, it thrashed around before finally retreating into its cage, shivering inside my old clothes. Devastated and terrified by all the traps in my house, it finally gave up on escaping. The next morning, I woke up and saw the cub lying obediently in its cage. Satisfied, I brought out a pound of roe deer meat from the cellar and tossed it over. Hunger drove the cub to devour the food instantly. I squatted nearby and promised that if it stayed well-behaved, it would have meat every day. After eating my own breakfast of wild monkey leg ferns, I grabbed a rope and a sickle, preparing to go cut branches in the mountains to fix my broken fence. Right as I stepped outside, I ran into Li Shumei. She carried a basket containing over 10 fresh eggs, which she handed to me so I could nourish my body. In those days, eggs were precious commodities, usually saved to trade for cornmeal. Seeing her thoughtful gift and blushing face, I felt overjoyed, knowing our relationship was officially cemented. Li Shumei asked why I was carrying a sickle and rope so early in the morning. I explained that I wanted to cut thumb-thick willow branches along the river behind my house to plant a live, dense fence. She loved the idea and insisted on coming along to help. At the riverbank, we enjoyed the beautiful spring scenery with clear water and swimming wild ducks. Li Shumei started snapping branches by kicking them, so I handed her my sickle to protect her hands from getting blisters. Using the sharp dagger Third Master gave me, I sliced through willow branches effortlessly like cutting tofu. Impressed by the quality of the blade, I silently vowed to use it and a proper rifle to hunt down the broken-tailed tiger for Third Master. After cutting several large bundles of branches, Li Shumei suddenly called out in excitement. She had found a nest hidden in a straw mat containing 7 green wild duck eggs. I suggested stir-frying them with wild monkey leg ferns, but she explained it would be better to hatch them into ducklings. As she bent down to collect the eggs, she slipped on the muddy bank and fell into the rushing, icy stream. She could not swim, and the freezing water caused her leg to cramp, making her choke and shout for help. Without hesitation, I leaped into the icy river to save her. Battling the swift current, I grabbed her under her armpits and kicked with all my strength until my feet touched the riverbed. After grabbing onto a bank rock, I dragged us both safely ashore. Li Shumei was soaked to the bone, her face pale, and her lips frozen purple as she began losing consciousness. I scooped her up in my arms and sprinted home. Once inside, I quickly removed her wet outer clothes and wrapped her tightly inside a warm quilt to save her from hypothermia. I ran to the store, bought ginger candy, brewed a warm bowl of ginger tea, and handed it to Li Shumei. As she drank, the blanket slipped, making her realize her state of undress. Panicked and blushing deeply, she pulled the blanket back over herself, sweating from both the tea and shyness. Seeing her break a sweat, I knew she would recover. I teased her gently, then went to the kitchen to boil more hot water for her. While we were talking, the wild wolf cub crawled out of its cage and howled impatiently. Its messy, burnt fur amused Li Shumei so much that she burst out laughing. The cub tried to jump up to bite her in retaliation, but failed and retreated back to its cage. As she laughed, her quilt slipped again, prompting her to call me a pervert and quickly cover up. I gave her a piece of meat from the vegetable cellar to feed the cub, then returned to the river to retrieve the cut willow branches and the 7 wild duck eggs. Just as I returned to the yard, Wang Jin called out from the gate. Worrying he might walk in on Li Shumei, I rushed back immediately. Fortunately, Wang Jin stood outside the gate to avoid intruding. He explained that a spot had opened up in the militia regiment and offered it to me, complete with a small annual stipend and access to target practice. I politely declined, though I promised to step up whenever the village needed help. I asked if the militia had any spare guns for sale. Wang Jun explained that government weapons could not be sold, but offered to take me to local families who owned old private rifles after lunch. I invited him to stay for a meal, but he smiled meaningfully and declined, pointing to Li Shumei's wet clothes hanging on my laundry line. Realizing why he had stayed outside the gate to avoid suspicion, I chuckled awkwardly and agreed to meet him at his house after lunch. When I returned home, Li Shumei was wearing my clothes while hers dried, busy cooking in the kitchen. Having a warm meal prepared for me made me feel deeply cared for. She made delicious scrambled eggs with wild monkey leg ferns, and as I praised her cooking, she blushed and admitted she would love to cook for me every day, before running back to the kitchen in embarrassment. After tidying the table and saying goodbye to Li Shumei, I met Wang Jun outside his house. He took me around the village to search for a usable firearm. After over an hour of checking rusted, poorly maintained weapons, we headed to the last house at the edge of the village. Wang Jin warned me to let him speak, as the owner, Old Feng To, had a notorious temper. We entered the yard and found Old Feng To smoking a pipe inside. Wang Jin offered him a cigarette and politely asked if he had a good gun to sell. Old Feng To revealed he owned a nearly brand new Type 56 semi-automatic rifle bought for his son, who had recently moved to the county town for work. He originally demanded 200 yuan, which Wang Jin found far too expensive. Seeing the old hunter's pride, I stepped in with respect. I complimented the game pelts on his walls, expressed my desire to learn hunting skills from him, and offered to share a portion of every game I hunted with him in the future. Pleased by my sweet tongue and polite attitude, Old Feng To recognized me as the young man who had single-handedly killed the bear and shared the meat with the village. Liking my courage and generosity, Old Feng To dropped the price to 150 yuan. When I admitted I did not have enough cash on hand, he surprisingly insisted I take the rifle home right away for my safety, telling me to pay him whenever I gathered the money. Overjoyed, Wang Jin tried to write an IOU for the transaction, but Old Feng To angrily tore up the paper, stating that formal IOUs were useless between honest neighbors. Old Feng To unwrapped layers of silk cloth to reveal a brand new Type 56 semi-automatic rifle. As I stroked the cool metallic body, I felt the thrill of reuniting with an old friend. To my delight, he tossed in a box of nearly 15 bullets for free. He warned me to be careful in the mountains and suggested finding a hunting partner. I thanked him and left with Wang Jin. Outside, Wang Jin expressed his surprise at Old Feng To's generosity in offering me credit and lowering the price. He suggested testing the rifle at a shooting range, but I preferred saving my precious bullets for actual game in the forest. Wang Jin grabbed his own gun, and we headed up the mountain together. After walking cautiously for over 10 minutes without seeing any animals, Wang Jin began to feel anxious. I reassured him that hunting requires patience. Suddenly, I heard faint cooing sounds and motioned for him to be quiet. 30 meters ahead, 2 male pheasants were fighting on a rock while a female watched nearby. I raised my rifle and took a shot at the largest male, but missed because the crosshairs were slightly off. As the startled birds took flight, I quickly adjusted and fired 2 consecutive shots. The bullets accurately struck both flying male pheasants in the head, dropping them instantly. Wang Jin stood in absolute shock, amazed by my incredible marksmanship. I drew my dagger, slit the pheasants' throats to bleed them, and collected our harvest. Instead of taking the same trail back down, we descended along the sunny southern slope to increase our chances of finding more game. Soon, I spotted a fresh row of large animal tracks on the ground. Recalling the tracking lessons Third Master taught me, I identified them as belonging to a herd of dozens of Sika deer. Since an adult Sika deer can weigh up to 400 or 500 pounds, harvesting a few would easily allow me to pay off my debt to old Feng To. I pointed out the tracks to Wang Jun, and he eagerly agreed to join me in tracking the herd. Wang Jun and I eagerly followed the Sika deer tracks, but I quickly noticed numerous clover-shaped wolf prints beside them. Realizing a large pack of over 30 wolves was hunting the deer, I urged Wang Jun to turn back to the village immediately. Before we could escape, more than 10 panicked Sika deer bolted through the woods toward us, with the ravenous wolf pack hot on their heels. The pack was led by a massive white wolf king, twice the size of a normal wolf. I shouted for Wang Jun to climb a tree, and we both scrambled up nearby trunks just in time. The wolves chased the deer past us, completely unaware of our presence. We waited in the trees for the danger to pass, but 10 minutes later, the wolf pack returned, dragging 3 dead deer right under our spot. We held our breath, but Wang Jun accidentally snapped a branch beneath his feet. The noise alerted the pack, and dozens of bloodthirsty wolves surrounded our trees, furiously clawing and gnawing at the trunks. Knowing they would chew through the wood, I raised my rifle and fired at the white wolf king. The cunning beast dodged the shot and retreated out of range. I turned my gun on the rest of the pack, killing a wolf with every shot until my ammunition ran out. Wang Jun ran out of bullets even faster, making little impact with his rifle. With the trees teetering on the edge of collapse, I realized we had to fight for our lives. I drew my sharp dagger, jumped down from the tree, and slit a wolf's throat in midair. Wang Jun leaped down with his short sword to join the melee. We engaged in a desperate hand-to-hand battle against the overwhelming pack. Soon, we were both badly injured. A wolf scratched my shoulder deeply, causing excruciating pain with every knife swing. Wang Jun had a chunk of flesh torn from his leg, exposing the bone, yet he stood his ground beside me. Seeing us exhausted and bleeding, the vengeful white wolf king crept up from behind a rock and lunged toward my exposed back. Noticing the white wolf king lunging at me from behind, I crouched low as it leaped over my head. Leaning back, I drove my short blade straight into its abdomen, slashing a deep half-meter wound. Bleeding heavily, the wounded alpha turned and fled into the jungle, causing the entire wolf pack to scatter in panic. With the threat gone, I turned to find Wang Jun unconscious, bleeding heavily from a massive thigh wound. I quickly gathered wild mugwort leaves, chewed them into a paste, and applied them directly to his injury to stop the bleeding. The intense pain briefly woke Wang Jun before he fainted again. I tore my fresh tank top into strips and used standard military techniques to bind his leg tightly. Leaving the dead wolves and deer behind, I hoisted Wang Jun onto my back and sprinted back to the village. Reaching the closed village health clinic, I kicked the wooden door open and laid Wang Jun on a bed. I searched the room for supplies, finding mercurochrome, gauze, bandages, and aspirin. After cleaning his wound with mercurochrome, I crushed the aspirin tablets over the injury to prevent infection and bandaged it tightly. Moments later, patrolling militiamen rushed in with flashlights. They were stunned to see Wang Jun barely alive and me covered in blood. I explained how we were cornered by over 30 wolves, ran out of ammunition, and fought them off in hand-to-hand combat until I wounded the White Wolf King. The militiamen looked at me with deep admiration, viewing me as an invincible general. Once Wang Jun was stabilized, the intense adrenaline faded, and I finally felt the excruciating pain in my own scratched shoulder. I declined their offer to call a health worker, assuring them I could treat my minor injury at home. The militiamen then helped carry the unconscious Wang Jun safely back to his family. When Aunt Wang saw her injured husband, she almost fainted. I quickly helped her up and explained everything that had happened. Filled with immense gratitude, she tried to kneel and kowtow to thank me for saving her husband's life twice. First from the bear, and now from the wolf pack. I stopped her, helped her back to the bed, and assured her that Wang Jun was treated and would recover after a half-month of rest. After leaving Wang Jun's house, I asked the militia members to join me in the mountains tomorrow with guns to retrieve the carcasses of the wolves and 3 sika deer we killed. Excitement filled the group, knowing there would be plenty of meat for everyone. I returned to my house and noticed a warm light inside, as well as a partially repaired fence in my yard. I called out, and Li Shumei rushed out in tears, overwhelmed with anxiety over my late return. I reassured her that I was safe, though I mentioned Wang Jun was badly bitten. We went inside, where I saw a table of cold food she had prepared for me. As she reached for the plates, she saw my blood-soaked, shredded clothes and screamed in shock. Seeing the severe wound scabbed over my shoulder, she panicked and insisted on fetching a health worker. I took her hand, showed her the medical supplies I brought from the clinic, and told her I could manage. Feeling her hand in mine, she blushed, but firmly insisted on treating my injury herself, since it could not easily reach my own shoulder. Seeing that my coat was stuck to my bleeding wound, she felt heartbroken and anxious. Following my instructions, she brought a warm, wet towel to soak the cloth over my shoulder. Once the fabric loosened, she gently peeled the clothes away bit by bit. Though the pain made me gasp, I held my breath and endured it silently as she tended to my wound. Li Shumei carefully disinfected my wound with mercurochrome, applied medicine powder, and gently wrapped it in gauze. After she heated up dinner, we ate together under the warm candlelight. The atmosphere turned sweet, and I asked her to stay the night. She blushed deeply and hesitated, worried about what people would say. Seeing her shyness, I clarified that I only meant for her to sleep at one end of the heated bed while I slept at the other, so she would not have to walk home in the dark. Taking her hand, I sincerely confessed my feelings. Li Shumei gently reminded me that she needed a proper status, so she would not be viewed as a cheap woman. I gripped her hand tightly and promised to marry her in a grand way. After comforting her, I took a flashlight and walked her home safely. When I returned, the wild wolf cub squatted at the door and spun in circles to show me it was hungry. Realizing it had given up on escaping after its painful failures, I brought it a large piece of bear meat from the cellar. Feeling completely exhausted from yesterday's battle, I went to sleep. The next morning, the village militia arrived at my yard carrying rifles. They shared that Wang Jun had woken up and was already eager to hunt down the wolf pack. After thanking them, I stressed that we needed to stay vigilant, stick together, and focus on retrieving the carcasses. I led the armed group into the mountains. As we neared the fight location, a hare darted out, followed by over 10 wolves hiding in the bushes. Seeing our large, armed group, the wolves immediately turned and fled. After 10 more minutes of walking, we reached the battleground. Over 10 wolf and sika deer carcasses lay scattered under the giant tree, staining the area with blood. The militiamen were shocked to see the aftermath of yesterday's battle with their own eyes. They quickly split into small groups to carry the wild wolves and sika deer. Looking around, I realized several wolf carcasses and a sika deer were missing. Inspecting a deep drag mark, I spotted enormous plum blossom footprints larger than my palm next to it. I immediately recognized them as belonging to a tiger, likely the broken-tailed Siberian tiger. Third Master had been hunting. Determined to investigate, I instructed the militia to carry the game back along the original path. I gathered 40 to 50 rounds of ammunition from them and followed the drag marks into the deep mountains alone. After 20 minutes, I reached a riverbank where the remains of the missing sika deer lay surrounded by a flock of hungry, aggressive crows with blood-red eyes. When a massive crow lunged at me, I shot it mid-air, blasting it to pieces. The loud gunshot scattered the rest of the flock. I searched the riverbank, but the tiger's tracks disappeared at the water's edge. Even after wading across to search the opposite bank, I found no further traces and decided to head back. To avoid encountering the main wolf pack, I took an alternate route through a ravine. Along the way, I heard a loud buzzing coming from a massive beehive inside a hollow locust tree. A bee landed on my arm, and I recognized it as the venomous Lesser Kingen Range black bee. Third Master had warned me that a single sting causes massive swelling, and multiple stings can be fatal. I stood completely still until the bee flew away, then carefully backed up. Suddenly, my foot accidentally kicked a stone that rolled toward the tree. The entire swarm exploded out of the hive in a furious rage. Remembering Third Master's advice, I sprinted against the wind to slow the bees down. After 10 minutes of running for my life, with the swarm on my heels, 4 injured wolves from yesterday's pack suddenly leaped out of the bushes ahead. They bared their teeth, preparing to pounce on me for revenge. But as I sprinted straight toward them instead of running away, the wolves froze in confusion, just before the massive dark cloud of angry black bees swarmed over the rise behind me. Knowing how terrifying the black bees were, the 4 wolves turned pale with fright and tried to run away. I raised my rifle and shot all 4 precisely in their hind legs. Though they limped as fast as they could, their reduced speed allowed me to easily overtake them. Seconds later, the dark cloud of black bees completely swarmed the 4 wolves, leaving them howling in agony until they fell silent. As I ran several miles away, I felt a sharp pain in the back of my hand. Looking down, I saw a tiny stinger embedded in my skin, causing my hand to swell and turn red. Remembering Third Master's advice that urine helps neutralize black bee venom, I pulled out the needle and used my own urine to wash the sting. It helped stop the redness from spreading, but my hand swelled to the size of a clay pot. Swearing revenge on the beehive for its honey later, I limped back to the village. When I arrived at the brigade headquarters, a massive, noisy crowd had gathered around the 8 wolves and 2 sika deer brought down from the mountain. Some arrogant outsiders from neighboring Sanhe village openly mocked me, claiming I was too skinny to hunt wolves and boasting that they could kill tigers if I could kill wolves. The united villagers of Hmong Family Gully immediately shouted back in my defense, and the heated argument almost turned into a physical fight. I fired a loud gunshot into the air, instantly silencing the crowd. As the crowd parted, Village Chief Mangua walked up to me and whispered that Sanhe village had brought their entire village to demand a share of our harvest. Right then, Wang Deju, the village chief of Sanhe village, stepped forward with a fake smile. He shamelessly claimed that his village had been hunting that wolf pack for a long time, asserting that I only succeeded because the wolves were already exhausted by them. He arrogantly demanded half of our kill. Village Chief Mengguo cursed at him for his shameless lie. I stared at Wang Deju with a cold, deadly gaze, making the greedy man shudder in fear as he tried to maintain his fake story. The villagers of Sanhe village backed up their village chief, Wang Deju, helping him lie that they had been hunting the wolf pack for over half a month. Tired of their ridiculous claims, I pressed my cold gun barrel directly against the back of Wang Deju's head. He froze in terror, his legs trembling as he begged me to put the weapon down. I ordered him to leave with his entire village or face the consequences. Seeing their chief threatened, the armed men from Sanhe village grew furious and raised their weapons, threatening to fight us. I sneered at Wang Deju, warning him that if his people made a move, I would blow his head off first. An old elder from Sanhe village stepped forward with his cane to intervene, but when I mocked him for spouting nonsense, he became so enraged that he passed out. The crowd from Sanhe village continued shouting, declaring they would rather fight to the death than leave empty-handed. When the old man woke up, he proposed a 3-round challenge instead of a brawl. The first round testing keen eyes and mountain knowledge, the second hand-to-hand combat, and the third marksmanship. If Sanhe village won, they would take half the game. If I won, Sanhe village promised to give us a large fat pig. Hearing the prize of a fat pig, I accepted the bet and stepped back, leaving Wang Deju so relieved his knees buckled. My fellow villagers from Hmong Family Gully were deeply concerned. While they trusted my marksmanship, they worried about my young age and slender frame in the eyesight and hand-to-hand combat rounds. Many advised me to drop the challenge, promising that the entire village would stand behind me in a fight. Touched by their loyalty, I reassured them that I was confident and promised we would slaughter that pig for a feast once I won. Both sides cleared a large space in front of the brigade headquarters. From the Sanhe village crowd stepped a giant man over 2 meters tall, with arms thicker than my thighs and a scarred, menacing face. Cracking his knuckles, he glared down at me, and growled that I had better not cry when I lost. The crowd gasped as a giant man named Mangzi stepped forward from Sanhe village. The villagers whispered in fear, warning me that Mangzi had been hunting since he was 10, had killed 3 bears alone, and was a terrifying fighter who once bit off someone's ear. They worried his massive size and strength would prove far too dangerous for me. Unbothered by their chatter, I stepped forward and asked him how we were playing the first round. Mangzi pulled out a slingshot, picked an oval pebble from the ground, and declared that whoever found the thrown stone first in the woods would win. After examining the rock, I handed the slingshot to a local militiaman, who launched the pebble deep into the forest. Mangzi strode into the trees, and I followed closely behind. Inside the forest, I noticed a fresh dent on a birch tree trunk, realizing the pebble had ricocheted rather than flying straight. Following the sound's trajectory, I searched the dense brush. Spotting the white pebble nearby, I rushed toward it. Suddenly, Mangzi grabbed the back of my neck and threw me backward to steal the victory. As he reached for the stone, I threw my dagger, pinning a stick right next to his fingers and cutting a forearm-thick branch in half. Shocked, Mangzi pulled his hand back just in time. Enraged, he abandoned the stone and threw a powerful punch at me. I dodged his fist and delivered a sharp kick to his knee, sending him down in pain. I scooped up the pebble, declared my victory, and sprinted back toward the village. The clumsy giant tried to chase me, but I easily outran him through the thick brush. I emerged from the woods, holding the pebble high in the air. The villagers of Mung Family Gully burst into loud cheers, celebrating our first win. Disheveled and furious, Mangzi finally stumbled out of the trees. When his own village members criticized him for losing, Mangzi grabbed one of the loudmouths by the collar, terrifying the man so badly that he passed out and wet himself. Mangzi tossed him aside and sat down, bitterly waiting for the next round. After resting for 10 minutes, Mangzi challenged me to a hand-to-hand fight with no weapons or restrictions, declaring that whoever fell first would lose. I agreed immediately. When the fight began, Mangzi lunged forward, but I nimbly dodged his blows and countered with a sidekick to his waist and a sharp uppercut to his chin. Enraged, he tore his shirt to shreds, revealing a mountain of explosive muscles covered in severe battle scars. Looking like a ferocious demon, he charged at me again with wild, heavy punches. I evaded his attacks, kicked the back of his knee, and landed a quick combination of strikes on his back. Realizing brute force was failing, Mangzi tried a clever tactic. He feigned a frontal punch, then slammed his massive body into me, knocking me off balance. He immediately followed with a heavy elbow strike toward my neck. I blocked the impact, grabbed his arms, and executed a clean, over-the-shoulder throw, slamming him onto the hard ground. Before he could recover, I quickly mounted him, locked his head between my legs, and trapped his arm in a tight cross-armbar chokehold. No matter how hard he struggled, my hold was unbreakable. I applied intense pressure, and when he tried to curse at me, I tightened the lock until he screamed in pain. Realizing his arm was about to snap, Mangzi shouted in agony and surrendered. I released him, winning the second round as well. The villagers of Mung Family Gully erupted into loud cheers, amazed by my incredible fighting skills, while the crowd from Sanhe village fell completely silent. Unwilling to accept defeat, Mangzi silently walked over to a bluestone slab and unwrapped a cloth bundle. Inside was a gleaming, vintage Type 97 sniper rifle from the Japanese occupation era. With a cold expression, he picked up the rifle and suddenly aimed the muzzle straight at me. Sensing danger from behind, I turned to find Mangzi pointing his sniper rifle at me. Coldly, I asked if he could not handle losing, but he replied that a man's word is his bond. He admitted defeat in hand-to-hand combat, but insisted on finishing the third round of marksmanship to save face. For the contest, Mangzi embedded 2 copper coins into a tree trunk nearly 100 meters away. Since my Type 56 semi-automatic rifle could not shoot that far, I borrowed his vintage Type 97 sniper rifle. Delighted, Mangzi assumed my lack of familiarity with his rifle's left-leaning trajectory would guarantee his victory. Mangzi took the first shot, successfully hitting the left side of his coin. I took the rifle, briefly checked it, and suddenly raised the barrel to fire a single shot without seemingly aiming at all. The crowd from Sanhe village burst into loud laughter, mocking me for not even knowing how to aim properly. Ignoring their taunts, I walked up to village chief Manhwa and smiled, telling him I had not failed him. Mangzi walked over to the tree to retrieve the coins, but when he examined my target, he froze in disbelief. My bullet had passed directly through the center hole of the copper coin, pinning it to the wood. Stunned by the massive gap in our skills, Mangzi approached me, admitting complete defeat and expressing his deep respect for my abilities. When he mentioned that he admired only his father and Third Master, I smiled and shared how I had recently shared drinks with Third Master in the mountains. Hearing this, Mangzi laughed heartily. Before leaving, Mangzi bowed to apologize for his village's greedy behavior, explaining that the harsh famine had forced them to act out of desperation. I quickly helped him up, appreciating his bold, responsible nature, and suggested we hunt together in the future. As the villagers of Sanhe village prepared to leave, I raised my rifle and stopped village chief Wang Deju. I reminded him of the bet and insisted he sign a formal, written agreement, promising to deliver the large, fat pig to us, preventing him from backing out later. Enraged, Wang Deju shouted that as a village official, he would never renege on a debt. Unimpressed, I kept my gun pointed at him until he signed an IOU promising to deliver the large, fat pig within 3 days. Seeing our armed villagers surrounding him, while his own villagers hid in the background, Wang Deju had no choice but to write the note before slinking away. Once Sanhe village left, the villagers of Meng family gully erupted in cheers. I announced to the crowd that as soon as the pig arrived, I would treat everyone in the village to a grand pig slaughtering feast. The excited villagers tossed me high into the air in celebration. Amid the crowd, I caught sight of Li Shumei smiling at me beneath a distant willow tree. She subtly waved to me before disappearing. When village chief Meng Guoqing asked how I planned to divide our harvest, I explained that Wang Jin and I would split the game equally, though I set aside 1 wolf from my share for the militia members who helped us. I also secretly promised the village chief that I would keep the valuable deer antlers and deer penises for him. Grandpa Li from the Supply and Marketing Cooperative weighed the game on the spot. After I set aside the antlers and deer penises, Grandpa Li bought the remaining 7 wolves and 2 sika deer from me for a total of 650 yuan. Hearing that huge sum, the surrounding villagers gasped in shock and envy. However, when they noticed I kept the deer penises and antlers for myself, they began whispering among themselves, teasing that I needed kidney tonics to keep up with Li Xiaomei. Ignoring their jokes, I collected the thick stack of cash from Grandpa Li. I tried to find Li Shumei, but seeing she had already gone home, I headed straight to Wang Jun's house instead. Outside, I saw Aunt Wang chopping wood and offered to take over. She smiled, put down the axe, and led me inside, mentioning that Wang Jun had been eagerly talking about our mountain battle all morning. The moment Wang Jun saw me walk in, he perked up with excitement and invited me to join him on the heated bed. I pulled out the wad of money from my robes to give Wang Jun his share of our hunting spoils. When I handed him 360 yuan out of the 650 yuan total, he was completely shocked. He initially tried to refuse every penny, insisting I keep it all for my future marriage since he owed me his life. However, I reminded him of the strict rules of hunting, warning him that failing to split game fairly brings bad luck. Reluctantly, he agreed to split the 650 yuan equally so neither of us lost out. I also promised to bring him his share of the deer antlers and penises, once Grandpa Li finished processing them. Next, I stopped by my house to grab roe deer meat and 2 bottles of liquor before heading to old Feng To's house. I handed him the 150 yuan I owed for the Type 56 rifle. He happily accepted it without even counting, praising me for beating the arrogance out of Sanhe village. He invited me to stay for drinks, and after enjoying a meal together, I went home and fell asleep on my heated bed. While I slept, the wounded White Wolf King glared at the village from a northern hillside before leading the remaining wolves deep into the forest. I woke up around 3 in the afternoon, soaked in sweat. Needing a bath, I grabbed a towel, a tank top, and my new shirt, then headed to a quiet, shallow spot in the river. As I relaxed in the warm water, a sharp pain suddenly shot through my groin. I jumped up with a splash and discovered a bluish-gray freshwater crayfish tightly pinching my private parts. I carefully pried the claws open and pulled the creature out of the water. Examining it closely, I realized it was a wild river crayfish, a rare delicacy I remembered loving during my childhood. Excited by the delicious discovery, I immediately began searching the shallow waters to catch more. I lifted a big rock in the shallow river and caught about 7 or 8 pounds of freshwater crayfish, tying my pant legs to carry them. Suddenly, a distant scream echoed from the direction of my house. Leaving the crayfish behind, I pulled on my shoes and sprinted back. 10 minutes earlier, Hu Biao, the village warehouse manager, had snuck into my yard and crept inside. Out of revenge, he hid a framed cloth bundle in my wardrobe to set me up. But before he could leave, the wolf cub lunged out from a pile of old clothes and bit tightly into his calf. Screaming in pain, Hu Biao grabbed a fire poker and repeatedly beat the cub's head until the little creature fainted, leaving a scrap of torn work pants in its mouth. Hu Biao kicked the cub aside and limped away. When I arrived, I found my front door wide open and the wolf cub lying unconscious in a pool of blood. I quickly checked his condition and was relieved to find he only suffered a temporary concussion without severe internal damage. I retrieved the piece of torn fabric from his mouth and recognized it as expensive work cloth, a material rarely worn in our village outside of Hu Biao. Checking around the room, I realized nothing was stolen and figured Hu Biao had fled after being bitten. I placed the wolf cub on my heated bed to rest, put on pants, and jogged back to the river to retrieve my catch. After gathering the remaining crayfish, I returned home. The cub had regained consciousness and whimpered pitifully. Touched by his bravery, I comforted him, brought him a large piece of roe deer meat from the cellar, and named him Chasing Wind, hoping he would be as swift as the wind when hunting. By nightfall, I ate a bowl of leftover rice porridge, let Chasing Wind sleep on the heated bed beside me, and drifted off to sleep. In the middle of the night, Chasing Wind's ears suddenly twitched, and he slowly stood up, walking toward me on the bed. During the night, Chasing Wind struggled between wild instinct and reason, but ultimately chose to curl up peacefully in my arms. I woke up after 8 a.m. to Li Shumei urgently calling me from outside. She rushed in, blushing as I scrambled to cover up in my underwear, and explained that 3 wild duck eggs in her duck nest had been emptied. I accompanied her to inspect the duck pen and noticed 3 tiny holes drilled into the empty shells, along with small peanut-sized plum blossom prints on the window frame. Recognizing the marks, I told her a weasel was behind it. Fearful of Wong Tai Sin, she asked how to protect her remaining eggs. To prevent further damage, I mixed yellow mud and dry grass to patch every hole in her drafty duck coop, reinforcing the door with planks and nails. As she wiped her sweaty forehead, I gently wiped off the mud she accidentally smeared on her face. Moving past the scare, we agreed to meet for dinner to cook wild greens and the river crayfish I had caught. I grabbed my gun to head into the mountains, stopping first at the supply and marketing cooperative. Unknown to me, Chasing Wind slipped out the door and trailed behind me. At the shop, Grandpa Lee excitedly told me that the county praised our recent game delivery, offering a commendation flag and promising a 20% price bonus on future orders. Suddenly, Chasing Wind burst inside and growled at Grandpa Lee, who called him an ugly mongrel. Before the cub could attack, I grabbed him by the scruff of his neck, instantly subduing him. When Grandpa Lee looked closer at the burnt-furred cub, his eyes widened in shock. He warned me sternly that it was a wild wolf, not a dog. I admitted I was training him for hunting, but Grandpa Lee angrily scolded me, recalling how a fellow villager named Song Lao was killed in his sleep by a raised wolf cub. Ignoring Grandpa Lee's stern warnings about raised wolves, I reassured him that I had already disciplined Chasing Wind. I bought a fresh batch of Type 56 semi-automatic ammunition from him, and he warned me to stay alert because wild wolves hold severe grudges. When I tried to leave Chasing Wind at my house before heading out, he refused to go inside, so I brought him along to search the lower mountain slopes. As we walked, Chasing Wind suddenly froze, crouched low, and growled toward a grassy mound 50 meters away. 4 fat wild hares were sunbathing there. I held Chasing Wind back until I raised my rifle and shot the largest one. When the others scattered, Chasing Wind sprinted like an arrow, chased down a fleeing hare, and pinned it by the throat. To my delight, he did not eat his catch. He waited patiently for me to collect it. I tied the 2 hares over my shoulder and kept moving along the hillside. Suddenly, a wild wolf darted out of the bushes, spotted me, and fled. Seconds later, a loud howl echoed through the forest. Recognizing it as a signal to the pack, I called Chasing Wind, and we sprinted back toward the village. Just as we reached the village entrance, dozens of wolves emerged from the tree line. The pack parted, and the injured White Wolf King stepped forward, glaring bitterly at me. Chasing Wind took a few steps toward them, smelling a familiar scent, but the White Wolf King let out a threatening roar. Instantly snapping out of his daze, Chasing Wind bared his growing fangs and roared back with fierce determination. I raised my rifle, aiming at the White Wolf King, and warned him not to step any closer. At that moment, barking echoed from the village as a dozen wolfhounds and over 20 armed villagers rushed out to support me. Seeing the overwhelming crowd, the White Wolf King gave a final, angry howl and led his pack back into the deep jungle. Relieved, I wiped the cold sweat from my forehead. When the villagers gathered around, I explained what happened. The close call reminded everyone of the village's dark history, back when it was called Golden Gully, when a starving wolf pack once invaded during a severe drought and slaughtered the town. Feeling guilty for luring the wolf pack near the village, I volunteered to help the militia protect our home. Drawing on my past experience as a Special Forces soldier, I helped dig traps and set up defenses around the perimeter until dusk. The village chief also placed Fifth Brother in charge of night patrols and ordered everyone to lock their doors securely. At lunchtime, I donated my 2 hunted wild rabbits so everyone could enjoy a hot, hearty pot of rabbit and potato stew together. As evening approached, I remembered my dinner plans with Li Shumei and hurried home. Smoke was already rising from my chimney, and I found Li Shumei inside tending to the stove. She had prepared steamed crawfish tofu using the river crayfish I caught, along with fresh wild vegetables. The crawfish tofu turned out pure white and delicate like jade. She gently fed me a spoonful to test it, and its delicious, smooth flavor blew me away. We sat down together to enjoy our meal, but as we ate, a strange, overwhelming heat began surging through our bodies. My face felt burning hot, and an intense, restless power welled up inside me. I realized the wild crayfish must have had powerful medicinal properties that reacted unexpectedly with the wild greens. Li Shumei felt the intense heat as well. Weakened by the effect, she removed her outer jacket, leaving only her light undershirt. Seeing her flushed face and alluring figure, my breath hitched, and my self-control began to slip. Unaware of her actions, she stepped closer and wrapped her arms around my neck. I placed my hands on her waist, and as our breathing mingled, the room grew intensely charged. Driven by the overwhelming passion of the moment, we spent the night together in each other's arms. The next morning, I woke up to find Li Shumei sleeping peacefully beside me. As my mind cleared, memories of the wild night came flooding back. When she opened her eyes and realized we were wrapped intimately together, her entire face flushed deep red. We lay together in silence, listening to the rapid beating of each other's hearts. I placed my hand on Li Shumei's waist and promised to take full responsibility for her. Just then, the village chief knocked on the door to speak with me. She quickly hid under the covers, blushing, while I pulled on my clothes and stepped outside to meet him. The village chief shared a bold idea. Given the ongoing famine, he proposed luring the retaliating wolf pack directly into the village to trap and eliminate them completely. The money from selling the wolf carcasses would then be distributed among the villagers. I warned him about the extreme danger and the fierce White Wolf King. But, considering how much the villagers were struggling, I agreed to help plan the operation carefully. Before he left, I asked where I could get a marriage certificate. Realizing I intended to marry Li Shumei, the village chief laughed heartily and explained I could get it at the commune. He reminded me to treat her well, noting she was a young woman who had suffered after her former fiancé passed away before they could marry. I assured him I would set a good example and protect the village. Returning inside, I gently uncovered Li Shumei's blushing face and told her that once we finished the wolf hunt, We would go to the commune to get our marriage license. She happily agreed and snuggled against my chest. After making breakfast and walking her home, I set out with my rifle. Along the way, I ran into Mangzi, driving a massive 400 to 500-pound fat pig into the village. Laughing, Mangzi explained that when Sanhe village refused to give up a collective pig, the furious villagers almost tore down village chief Wang Deju's house, forcing Wang Deju to surrender his own prized pig to pay off the debt. When Mangs mentioned he came to invite me hunting, I explained our plan to trap and eliminate the entire wolf pack inside the village. Amazed by our boldness, he praised the strategy. I invited him to join the hunt and share in the spoils. Driven by the thrill of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Mangzi agreed without hesitation. Mangzi and I drove the 400 to 500-pound fat pig to the brigade headquarters. The villagers gathered around with eager eyes, thrilled for the pig slaughtering feast I had promised. When I asked if anyone had sauerkraut to share, the villagers enthusiastically volunteered to bring plenty from their homes. I approached Grandpa Li, who was sharpening his knife to butcher the pig, and asked him to save all the pig's blood and offal completely intact, as I needed them for a critical purpose later. While the villagers busied themselves preparing the feast, Mangzi suggested taking a stroll into the mountains. I quickly declined, explaining that the angry wolf pack was lurking nearby and would swarm us at the sound of a single gunshot. Instead, we headed to my house, where Chasing Wind growled warily at Mangzi. Spotting the white tuft on the tail, Mangzi gasped in shock when he realized Chasing Wind was a wild wolf cub. He was even more stunned when the cub rolled onto his back, exposing his belly for me to scratch, amazed that a wolf could be so tame. We cooked a meal, shared a drink, and chatted until 4 in the afternoon. When we returned to the brigade headquarters, 3 massive iron pots were bubbling with white meat and golden sauerkraut, filling the air with a rich aroma. As dusk fell, a bonfire was lit, and the entire village sat down together at large tables to enjoy the delicious pig slaughter dish. During the feast, the village chief asked me to address the crowd regarding our plan to eliminate the wolf pack. I explained to the villagers that taking the initiative to wipe out the wolves would keep our village safe and bring in a valuable harvest. I scheduled the operation for the following night under the full moon, explaining that I would spread the pig's blood and offal throughout the village to lure the wolves into a trap while everyone hid safely in trees and high places to shoot them. I provided detailed instructions on how to stay safe during the ambush, and everyone nodded in serious agreement. However, just as we finished talking, and everyone prepared to head home for the night, dozens of loud, terrifying wolf howls suddenly echoed from outside the village. Hearing the sudden wolf howls, I realized the wolves were invading earlier than expected. I immediately ordered all the villagers to take shelter in the brigade headquarters warehouse, while the militia members rushed home to grab their rifles. Over on the western mountaintop, the White Wolf King ordered his pack to attack. As the wolves charged into the village, the leading ones fell directly into our hidden spike traps. The angry White Wolf King quickly howled a new command, ordering his pack to scatter and bypass the traps. By then, the militia members and I had retrieved our guns and taken positions up in large trees. When the wolves bypassed the traps and entered the village streets, I gave the order to open fire. A chaotic battle erupted. Hearing the gunshots, the White Wolf King howled again, commanding his pack to disperse into individual family courtyards. Using the courtyard walls as cover, the wolves slaughtered the village livestock, making it nearly impossible for the militia to get clear shots. Suddenly, a wolf lunged at a frightened militiaman in a tree. The man panicked, dropped his gun, lost his footing, and fell to the ground. I instantly shot the lunging wolf, but more wolves rushed toward the terrified, helpless man. Jumping down from my tree, I ran to shield him, firing my rifle continuously. Mangzi leaped down from his tree to help, dragging the paralyzed militiaman into a nearby courtyard for cover. Inside the yard, we realized we were almost completely out of ammunition. The rest of the militia's gunfire gradually died down as well, leaving the wolves in control of the streets. I told Mangza that we had to rely on close-quarters combat to hold the courtyard entrance. Drawing my short blade, I leaped forward and killed the lead wolf. Mangzi emptied his last shots, drew his dagger, and joined me in blocking the doorway. Seeing us hold off his pack, the White Wolf King let out a furious roar from the mountaintop. Enraged, the wolves frantically attacked the wooden fence until it collapsed. Spotting the White Wolf King under the moonlight, I pointed him out to Mangzi, telling him that killing the Wolf King was our only chance to make the pack retreat. As the wolves swarmed into the courtyard, Manga promised to hold the line alone so I could slip away to target the leader. Standing back to back, we engaged the swarming wolf pack in a desperate fight for survival. To slow down the swarming wolf pack without filling the doorway with corpses, Mangzi and I slashed the wolves' legs, disabling them. Despite our early advantage, our stamina quickly waned, and the attacks grew more ferocious. A muscular wolf lunged at Mangzi's neck and dragged him down, but Mangzi killed it with a dagger across its throat. As another wolf pounced, a sharp gunshot rang out through the night, blowing the wolf's head open. A skilled marksman sprinted through the darkness, taking down wolves with lethal precision. To my excitement, I recognized Third Master. He swiftly climbed a nearby willow tree and began firing short bursts, drastically reducing the wolves' numbers. With Third Master's sniper support easing the pressure, I told Mangzi to hold the courtyard, while I snuck up the mountain to eliminate the White Wolf King. I climbed the back wall and headed toward the hilltop. Meanwhile, the remaining wolves fought blindly until Third Master and Mangzi eliminated every last one. Seeing his entire pack wiped out, the enraged White Wolf King roared in fury and tried to flee deep into the forest. I intercepted him with a rifle shot to his hind leg. Though wounded, the Wolf King charged straight at me. I nimbly dodged his pounce, but he countered with a claw strike, aggravating his old wound in the process and slowing down. Seizing the opening, I lunged forward and drove my short blade deep into his neck, severing his throat. The fierce light in his eyes faded, and he collapsed lifeless to the ground. Relieved that our village was finally safe from the wolf pack, I stood over the dead leader. Third Master and Mangzi ran up the mountain, and we shared a victorious smile. Dragging the heavy White Wolf King behind us, we walked back down to the village. Seeing that the wolves were completely wiped out, the militia members cautiously climbed down from the trees. Looking at the dozens of wolf carcasses covering the ground, the villagers burst into wild, joyful cheers, moved to tears by our hard-fought victory. Hearing the celebration, the terrified villagers, hiding inside the brigade headquarters warehouse, slowly pushed open the doors. The villagers gasped in disbelief as they stepped out of the warehouse and saw the dozens of wolf carcasses covering the ground. Mangzi, Third Master, and I dragged the White Wolf King's heavy body down from the mountaintop, and the crowd erupted in enthusiastic cheers, praising us as heroes. Seeing Li Shumei in the crowd, I waved to her, and she blushed softly before joining the others to help. Village Chief Mengguoqing patted my shoulder in deep admiration. I suggested a fair plan to distribute our massive harvest. First, use a portion of the funds to compensate every household for lost livestock at 20% above market value. Next, give a small share of meat to every household, divide half of the remaining meat among the militia, and split the final portion equally between Third Master, Mangzi, and me. The village chief wholeheartedly agreed, realizing I had truly stepped up as a leader. In total, 75 wolves were collected, worth around 4,500 yuan, an incredible sum that would transform our village. As dawn broke, Third Master, Mangzi, and I returned to my house to rest and chat on the heated bed. When I asked Third Master how he knew to intervene, he explained that he saw a dozen wolves rushing past him in the forest earlier that afternoon. Realizing something was wrong, he followed them to the village just in time to join the fight. Grateful for his help, I went to the kitchen and cooked a large pot of stewed roe deer meat and potatoes, serving it with warm liquor. As we drank, I suddenly remembered my recent discovery in the mountains and told Third Master that I had spotted the large, distinct footprints of the broken-tailed tiger about 10 miles west of our village. Hearing this, Third Master instantly sobered up, grabbed my arm, and asked where he could find it. I promised to lead him there tomorrow. Eager for the hunt, we put away the alcohol and lay down on the heated bed to get some well-deserved rest. When Mangzi and I woke up after 9 in the morning, Third Master was already standing by the window smoking, his mind heavy with thoughts of the broken-tailed tiger. After getting dressed, the three of us went to the supply and marketing cooperative to restock our ammunition. At the shop, Grandpa Lee was busy loading leftover wolf carcasses onto a horse carriage to sell in the county town. I was surprised to see over 30 wolf carcasses remaining. Grandpa Lee warmly explained that the grateful villagers refused extra compensation for their lost livestock, touched by my generous spirit. Since the shop was low on cash, Grandpa Lee promised to pay me for the wolves after selling them in town, but he handed us 3 boxes of fresh ammunition first before heading out. Armed with fresh bullets, Third Master, Mangzi, and I headed into the deep forest. We intentionally passed by wild game without firing a single shot, knowing that a single gunshot would alert and spook the clever broken-tailed tiger. I guided them to the river, where I had previously lost track of the tiger's drag marks. Inspecting the area, Z quickly spotted fresh claw marks on a large rock along the stream. Third Master closely examined the prints, excitedly confirming they belonged to the broken-tailed tiger and were made within the last 12 hours. Suddenly, a panicked roe deer leaped out of the bushes and sprinted right past us. Moments later, a massive tiger with a short, chopstick-length tail burst out from the thick brush. Seeing us, the broken-tailed tiger roared furiously and paced back and forth. Fueled by years of anger, Third Master immediately pulled the trigger, aiming straight for its head. The tiger reacted with incredible speed, dodging the fatal headshot and leaping aggressively toward Third Master. Mangzi and I immediately opened fire, unleashing a barrage of bullets. Though agile enough to dodge most shots, the tiger took several hits. As its jaws opened to bite Third Master, I took careful aim and fired multiple shots into its chest, while Mangzi shot its hind legs to slow it down. Realizing it was outmatched by our combined firepower, the severely wounded, broken-tailed tiger turned and sprinted away into the dense jungle cover. Third Master shouted for us to give chase, and we sprinted into the woods after the fleeing beast, determined not to let it escape us this time. We tracked the broken-tailed tiger's blood trail for over an hour into a mountain hollow, where the bloodstains gradually began to thin out. Just as we were about to follow the trail over the next ridge, Third Master suddenly stopped us. He warned that the area ahead was Beishan, a notorious forbidden zone filled with ferocious beasts and treacherous, bottomless ice holes. Third Master urged Mangzi and me to go back home, offering to stay behind alone so we would not risk our young lives. I immediately saw through his lie. Refusing to let him face the dangerous tiger by himself, I insisted that we either go back together or enter the mountain as a team. Reluctantly, Third Master agreed, warning us to watch our step. As soon as we entered Beishan, an icy chill enveloped us. Massive 100-meter-tall trees blocked out the sunlight, leaving the dark, snowy forest extremely gloomy and slippery. Third Master led the way, using a wooden stick to carefully probe the snow ahead for hidden ice holes. Along the way, Mangzi suddenly needed to relieve himself and stepped behind a nearby bush. Seconds later, he let out a shocked cry and vanished. I rushed over and found a dark opening in the snow where Mangzi had stepped into an icy pit. Fortunately, the hole was not too deep. I tied a rope to a nearby tree and lowered it into the pit, helping Mangzi pull himself back out. Terrified by the fall, Mangzi admitted he was so startled his stomachache completely vanished. We pushed forward until we reached a 10-meter-high cliff where the tiger's bloodstains suddenly disappeared. While searching the area, I noticed an unusual pile of dry grass at the edge of the cliff. I kicked the hay aside, revealing a hidden cave opening. Third Master inspected the crevice and pulled out a tuft of yellow tiger hair. Confirming the broken-tailed tiger had crawled inside, Third Master carefully crawled into the hole first, and Mangzi and I closely followed him inside. Crawling through the narrow rock passage for a few meters, we suddenly felt a warm breeze as the landscape opened up into a breathtaking hidden valley. While it was early May outside, this secluded paradise was lush and thriving, with vibrant flowers blooming, bees buzzing, and a tall tree bearing bright red apples. The temperature inside, easily 10 degrees warmer than the frozen forest outside. Spotting movement near the apple tree, I covered Mangzi's mouth and pointed. The injured, broken-tailed tiger was crouching beneath the tree, struggling to lick its wounds. Borrowing Mang Z's long-range sniper rifle, I adjusted for the wind speed and fired a precise shot. The bullet struck the tiger directly in its left eye. The beast howled in agony and rolled frantically on the ground. To ensure our safety, I stepped forward and fired a burst from my Type 56 rifle into its head, killing it instantly. Third Master fired 2 additional insurance shots before finally relaxing. Overcome with emotion, Third Master knelt down, drew his short blade, and cut off the remaining half of the tiger's tail. Wrapping it tightly in cloth, he held it to his chest and wept uncontrollably, crying out to the heavens that he had finally avenged his son's death. Mang Zi and I stood by his side in respectful silence until he regained his composure. As we prepared to process the heavy tiger carcass, I noticed that the path leading from the cave entrance to the fruit tree looked surprisingly man-made. Third Master suggested that frequent animal traffic had likely packed the dirt down over time, and urged us to hurry before nightfall. However, as I began cleaning the tiger, my blood-slicked short blade slipped from my hand and dropped to the ground. Instead of sinking into the soft soil, the blade struck something hard beneath the surface with a loud, metallic clink. Curious about the hard ground, I dug down 5 centimeters and uncovered a hand-laid bluestone road. Checking the surrounding area, I confirmed it was an ancient man-made stone path, likely left behind by the Jurchen people who once inhabited these lands. While processing the broken-tailed tiger's carcass, I heard a faint whimpering nearby. Cautiously approaching the sound, I discovered 2 newborn tiger cubs, one yellow and one white, lying in a hidden den. Their eyes were barely open. When I cradled them in my arms, they smelled the tiger scent on my clothes and snuggled against me. Third Master advised leaving them to their fate, warning that wild beasts could never be truly tamed. However, unable to let the helpless cubs die, I insisted on taking them home until they were old enough to survive on their own. During our discussion, the little white tiger opened his eyes, happily licked my hand, and let out a gentle howl. After finishing our task, we carefully detoured around Bashan to return home safely. Outside the mountain, Third Master and Mang Zi said their goodbyes, promising to meet up for future hunts. It took me 2 hours to walk back home. Seeing the cubs fast asleep, I tucked them onto the heated brick bed under some old clothes. Since I needed food for them, I quickly headed out to the supply and marketing cooperative to buy milk powder. The moment I left, Chasing Wind jumped onto the heated bed to investigate the strange, threatening scent coming from the pile of clothes. He pushed the blanket aside with his paw, startling the cubs. The little white tiger immediately hissed in defense, while the little yellow tiger opened his eyes and stumbled affectionately toward the wolf cub. Annoyed by the little white tiger's hostile attitude, Chasing Wind tried to step over the little yellow tiger to teach the white one a lesson. However, the hungry little yellow tiger mistook Chasing Wind's lower body for a mother's teat and bit down hard. Chasing Wind let out a shrill scream of agony, jumping frantically around the heated bed while trying in vain to pry the tiny tiger off him. Hearing Chasing Wind's desperate cries, I rushed back inside and carefully pried the hungry little yellow tiger off him. Relieved, Chasing Wind ducked into a corner with his tail tucked tight. I told him to watch over the cubs while I went to buy milk, then headed straight for the supply and marketing cooperative. Finding the shop closed, I ran into Aunt Chen, who kindly told me Grandpa Lee was in town selling the wolf carcasses. When I asked about fresh milk for my new puppy, she happily offered goat milk from her ewe, who had just given birth. Along the way, Aunt Chen warned me that Hu Biao had been acting suspicious, frequently traveling to town despite having a severe calf injury from a dog bite. Realizing Hu Biao was the burglar who got bitten by my wolf cub, I grew suspicious. Since nothing was stolen during his break-in, I realized he must have planted something in my house to set me up. At Aunt Chen's house, her husband, Uncle Wang, warmly greeted me and freshly milked a large basin of rich goat milk. He insisted I come back for free milk whenever I needed it, rather than wasting money on expensive formula. I carried the milk home and found Chasing Wind pinning down the 2 cubs. Once I stepped in, I poured the fresh goat milk into porcelain bowls. The two starving tiger cubs greedily gulped it down until their bellies ballooned, then happily snuggled together for a nap. Chasing Wind looked up at me longingly, so I poured him a bowl as well. After drinking his fill, he curled up right beside the tiger cubs. Watching the three of them sleep together, I smiled, imagining how incredible it would be to hunt in the mountains with two fully grown tigers and a wolf by my side. Remembering Aunt Chen's warning, I thoroughly searched my house for hidden planted evidence. After 30 minutes of digging through my bedding, I uncovered a suspicious red and white cloth package. Unwrapping it, I found a Japanese rising sun flag wrapped around a gold medal inscribed with the words "Long Live the Empire." My face darkened as I realized just how ruthless Hu Biao truly was. In this day and age, having such items hidden in my home would get me arrested as a foreign spy. I threw the Japanese flag into the stove pit and burned it to ashes, but kept the gold medal in my pocket. Hearing the familiar sound of horse carriage bells, I went outside to meet Grandpa Lee, who had just returned from selling our wolves in the county town. I rode with him to the supply and marketing cooperative. Once we locked the doors, Grandpa Lee secretly handed me a cloth package containing 2,000 yuan in brand new 10 yuan banknotes. He excitedly told me that our village became famous in town, and the county supply leaders were so impressed by our wolf hunt that they gave us an extra 20% price bonus. I carefully put the money away, thanked him, and bought a long list of daily supplies, including milk powder and soap. Noticing the portrait of the great man on the wall, I asked if he sold national flags and badges. He handed them to me, somewhat puzzled by my request. Before I left, Grandpa Lee mentioned that getting a marriage certificate nowadays requires both people to present their household registration books and an official village certificate at the People's Commune. He urged me to treat Li Xiumei well, and I assured him I would. He even offered to help me secure ration coupons for a bicycle or sewing machine when I was ready. On my way home, I passed Hu Biao's house. Seeing no one around, I secretly hid the Japanese gold medal under a bluestone slab right at his front entrance to turn his trap back on him. Back home, I put away my supplies, grabbed a large piece of fresh tiger meat, and headed to Li Xiumei's house. When I arrived, several village women, including Aunt Chen, were gathered around her doorway. Fearing they were bothering her, I rushed over. But Aunt Chen quickly explained they only wanted to help her with household chores. The women teased me about our upcoming wedding, urging us to get married soon, buy the popular major appliances, and start a family. After the laughing women left, I took Li Xiumei's hand and led her inside. Looking into her eyes, I asked if she was free the next day, so we could go to the county town together and officially get our marriage certificate. When I asked Xiumei to marry me, she shyly agreed with tears of expectation in her eyes. That evening, she cooked a wonderful meal and poured a small cup of liquor for me. After finishing our dinner, I blew out the candles and spent another intimate night with her. The next morning, we walked hand in hand toward the brigade headquarters. The villagers watched us with bright smiles, offering warm congratulations and teasing us about when we would hold the wedding feast and start a family. With the village chief's permission, we borrowed a horse carriage and rode to the People's Commune in the county town. After filling out the paperwork and answering basic questions, we officially received our bright red marriage certificates. Holding the certificates, Xiumei wept tears of joy and relief in my arms, happy to finally have a reliable husband to lean on. I gently wiped her tears, promising to treat her well for the rest of my life. To celebrate, I took Xiumei to a local studio where we posed tightly together for our official wedding portrait. Afterward, I treated her to a delicious hot meal at a restaurant, insisting that our special day deserved a proper celebration. The friendly restaurant owner mentioned that a grand outdoor market was happening nearby, so after paying the bill, we went to check it out. The market was packed with bustling crowds and colorful stalls. Following a roaring cheer, we squeezed through the crowd to watch a street performance. A short man was making a large bear do somersaults, while a woman whipped two golden snub-nosed monkeys to make them do tricks with sticks. Xiumei watched with bright, starry eyes, cheering excitedly and telling me she had never seen anything so amazing in her life. However, as she cheered, The bear trainer quietly pulled a sharp spike from his pocket and jabbed it deep into the bear's back. Enraged by the sudden pain, the bear let out a ferocious roar and charged madly toward Xiumei and me. Seeing the massive beast lunging straight at us, I instinctively shouted for Xiumei to watch out. Seeing the enraged bear charge toward Li Xiumei, I stepped in front of her, ducked beneath the beast's strike, and grabbed its front leg. Using an over-the-shoulder throw, I slammed the 400 to 500-pound bear onto the ground. The crowd gasped in utter shock at my strength. The bear stood up angrily, but the trainer quickly pulled its reins and threatened it with a whip, forcing the beast to lie down obediently. The tamer apologized profusely to the crowd, then approached us to apologize again. When I stared at him, he praised my wrestling skills and asked where we were from. Li Xiumei naively answered that we were from Meng family gully. Hearing this, the man's eyes lit up, and he introduced himself as Old Hong, explaining that his traveling circus was planning to perform in our village next. Thrilled by the coincidence, Li Xiumei cheered, and my initial suspicions softened. Old Hong asked if they could travel back to Meng family gully with us. My special forces instincts warned me that something was off, but knowing they could easily find the village anyway, I agreed. As they packed up, I locked eyes with one of the troop members. Despite his forced smile, I sensed a distinct, lethal killing intent from him that only seasoned combatants possess, confirming my suspicion that this group was dangerous. We rode back with our horse carriage driver, arriving at the village after dark. The circus troupe set up tents at the village entrance, while Li Xiumei and I returned to my house. I invited her to stay the night with me, and she shyly agreed. Inside, I lit a candle to illuminate the dark room. Exhausted from our long trip, Li Xiumei flopped down onto the heated brick bed, only to land directly on top of the little white tiger. The cub let out a painful howl, scaring her half to death. She quickly picked up the creature to comfort it, thinking it was a fat kitten. However, as she looked closer, she spotted the king character mark on its forehead. Realizing in absolute horror that she was holding a real wild tiger cub, she gasped and accidentally tossed it away. I caught the little white tiger just in time before it could hit the ground. When Li Xiumei anxiously asked why I brought wild tigers home, I explained that Third Master, Meng Zi, and I killed a Siberian tiger in the mountains, and I couldn't bear to leave these two unweaned, helpless cubs to die. I reassured her that I would release them back into the wild once they grew old enough to eat solid food. I mixed 2 bowls of formula, and the starving cubs greedily drank every drop. Chasing Wind whimpered for a turn, so I comforted him with a head pat and went to cut meat from the vegetable cellar. Suddenly, I heard Li Xiumei cry out from the house. I rushed inside and saw the hungry tiger cubs climbing onto her, with the little white tiger burying his head into her collar to search for milk. I laughed, gently pulled the cub away, and mixed them another bowl of milk formula, along with a bowl for Chasing Wind. After feeding the 3 little ones, Li Xiumei and I quickly ate and got into bed. As I pulled her close, the 2 tiger cubs suddenly crawled out of their nest, squirmed into our blanket, and snuggled comfortably against Li Xiumei. Not to be left out, Chasing Wind curled up at my feet. Surrounded by the cozy little animals, Li Xiumei laughed, and we drifted off to sleep together in the warm bed. The next morning, loud gongs and drums woke us up. Old Hong from the circus was walking through the village with a megaphone, announcing a grand 8 a.m. show at the village entrance. Excited villagers quickly grabbed their stools and gathered around the stage. The performance began with Old Hong introducing a black bear named Zhuang Zhuang, who bravely leaped through a flaming iron ring, drawing loud cheers and applause from the audience. However, amidst the excitement of the crowd, I suddenly noticed that the suspicious circus member standing beside Old Hong had quietly vanished. Noticing the suspicious circus member was missing, I told Li Xiumei I was stepping away. I searched the surrounding area but couldn't find him. At noon, as the circus ended, the missing man squeezed through the crowd covered in dry leaves. He whispered something to Old Hong, whose face lit up before he quickly suppressed his excitement. Old Hong then announced a free extra show for the villagers tomorrow, making me suspect a hidden scheme. That evening, I watched 3 figures sneak out from the circus tent, with backpacks and head into the mountains toward Beishan. Realizing they were heading toward the mysterious valley, I quietly trailed them. Despite Beishan's dangers, the group navigated the terrain easily, eventually crawling into the cave entrance. Following them inside, I overheard their conversation in Japanese and realized they were secret agents from Gaoyao country. Driven by deep hatred for the enemy, I watched as they used folding tools to dig beneath the tall apple tree for 2 hours. They uncovered a massive stone door, cheering that they had found the long-lost treasure left behind by the Kwantung army. Suddenly, a gunshot echoed through the valley. The second man shot Old Hong dead on the spot, claiming Old Hong's wife for himself. Showing no remorse, the woman embraced the killer. As they began making out beside the corpse, I cleared my throat to interrupt them. The man panicked and tried to grab his gun, but realized he was completely naked. I confronted him about the stolen Chinese treasure, prompting him to throw dirt in my face as a distraction. He lunged for his clothes, drew his pistol, and turned around to shoot me, but froze instantly when he saw what was waiting for him. With my rifle already trained on him, I ordered the Japanese agent to throw down his gun. He pretended to lower his weapon, but suddenly dodged and tried to shoot me. I fired 2 quick shots with my Type 56 rifle, striking him directly between the eyebrows and killing him instantly. I ordered the surviving woman out of the pit. She put on her clothes, intentionally leaving her top unbuttoned, and feigned a trip to pounce on me. I nimbly dodged, causing her to fall into the mud. She began weeping pitifully, claiming her name was Lin Yue, and that the men had tricked her from Jilin and abused her. I told her to save her story for the police. As she stood up, she suddenly pulled a hidden dagger from her pocket and stabbed at me. I kicked her wrist, knocking the blade away. Realizing she was outmatched, she screamed a curse at Chinese people and bit down hard on a poison capsule hidden in her mouth. She foamed at the mouth and died within seconds. With all 3 secret agents dead, I searched their bodies but found no identification. Bringing 3 bodies back without proof would make me look like a murderer. So I decided to handle things myself. I jumped into the pit and inspected the stone door. Noticing a semicircular mechanism in the upper right corner, I pressed it. The heavy stone door groaned open, releasing a musty odor. I crafted a makeshift torch using Old Hong's clothes and a dry branch, then stepped inside. The torchlight revealed a massive cave filled with tall stacks of wooden crates. Opening the nearest box, I found 70 to 80 gleaming gold bars neatly stacked inside. Stunned, I realized the entire cave was packed with gold left behind by the Kwantung army. I carefully considered my options, handing it to the state, sharing it with the villagers, or keeping it all. Ultimately, I decided to leave the gold hidden in the cave for the time being, knowing it would be safe until I needed it. I resealed the cave mechanism, buried the 3 bodies under soil, and returned to the village late at night. Before heading home, I stopped by the circus tent and lifted the cloth over the cage. The 2 golden snub-nosed monkeys woke up and stared at me quietly with remarkably intelligent human-like eyes. Walking up to the circus tent, I lifted the silk cloth covering the iron cage, where 2 golden snub-nosed monkeys stared at me with striking intelligence. One monkey pointed straight at the cage latch. Understanding its intent, I pulled the latch, and the door swung open. The monkeys crawled out, bowed repeatedly, and pointed toward the other cages, holding a bear and a large python. When I approached the bear, it roared angrily, remembering how I had thrown it the previous day. I quickly stuffed a ball of mud into its mouth to silence it. The clever monkey wiped its muddy hands on the bear and chattered a few words, and the bear's angry eyes instantly cleared as it began bowing respectfully to me. I opened both cages, making them promise never to return to the village or harm humans. Relieved of their captivity, the bear excitedly grabbed the python's tail and dragged it toward the woods, while the 2 golden snub-nosed monkeys chattered their thanks and vanished into the trees. I finally returned home late at night to find the candles still lit. Pushing the door open, I found Xiumei lying with her back to me, softly sobbing. Filled with remorse, I climbed onto the bed and tried to cheer her up. Turning around with tear-streaked cheeks, she sobbed that we had just gotten married, and she was terrified something might happen to me in the middle of the night, leaving her a widow again. My heart ached, and I pulled her into my arms, promising never to hide my whereabouts from her again. When she asked where I had been, I told her the truth about eliminating the Japanese spies, omitting only the discovery of the hidden gold. Horrified, she worried they might have accomplices, or that we should call the police. I explained that without solid evidence, reporting it would only bring unnecessary trouble, and leaving them to the wild animals was the best solution. She lightly poked my chest, telling me I was reckless, but praising my kind heart for freeing the circus animals. We snuggled warmly together for the rest of the night. The next morning, the villagers woke up to discover that old Hong, his companions, and all the circus animals had completely vanished without a trace. The villagers were unbothered by the sudden disappearance of the circus performers and their animals, assuming they had simply left in a hurry. Meanwhile, as Li Shumei and I were eating breakfast, a chunk of roof plaster fell right into my bowl, splashing porridge all over my face. Looking up at the hole in our ceiling, I decided it was time to build a proper tile-roofed house. Li Shumei was shocked and thrilled by the idea, as tile-roofed houses were extremely rare in our region. I assured her I would head to the brick kiln in Fuxing village today to buy the materials. At the brigade headquarters, I asked the village chief if I could borrow a horse carriage to pick up the bricks. He praised my ambition and readily agreed. Before I left, he asked for my help with a dangerous problem. An aggressive sound of 7 or 8 wild boars, including piglets, was occupying a piece of wasteland behind our village. He promised that if I hunted them, I could keep all the boar meat and receive county coupons for a bicycle and a sewing machine. I gladly accepted the challenge. Since the regular driver was sick, I drove the horse carriage to Fuxing village myself. Arriving at the brick kiln around noon, I met a worker named Old Wang. I told him I wanted to build a 100-square-meter house with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a storeroom. The other workers laughed, thinking a young man like me was making wild promises. However, Old Wang calculated that I would need 12,700 bricks, costing 635 yuan. I readily agreed to the price and asked if they offered delivery to Meng Family Gully. Old Wang smiled and assured me that free delivery was included with any brick purchase, so he ordered the workers to start loading the carts. But just as they were about to begin, a skeptical worker interrupted, insisting that I pay the money up front before anyone did any heavy lifting. The brick kiln workers hesitated to load the truck, demanding payment up front and doubting I could produce over 600 yuan. Seeing Old Wang's apologetic expression, I pulled a thick stack of brand new 10 yuan banknotes from my pocket, counted out 64 bills, and handed them over. The entire crowd was dumbfounded by the sight of 1,000 yuan. Snapping out of his shock, Old Wang hurriedly ordered the workers to bring the green Jifang truck over and load it up immediately. While watching them work, I realized I needed skilled masons to build the house. I asked Old Wang if he had experienced builders, and he offered to send 2 skilled workers for 50 yuan, provided I found local villagers to assist. Accepting the fair deal, I handed him 5 more 10 yuan notes. Once the fully loaded truck took off toward our village, I boarded the horse carriage and began driving back at a steady pace. On my way back, dark, ominous clouds quickly rolled in, swallowing the sky. Realizing a storm was approaching, I whipped the horse to speed up, but the frightening dark clouds made the animal panic. Suddenly, a flash of lightning split the sky, followed by a deafening thunderclap, unleashing a heavy downpour. Terrified, the horse reared up, snapped its bit, broke free from the reins, and galloped off into the distance, leaving me behind with the carriage. Knowing an experienced horse would find its way home, I was left stranded in the pouring rain. Unable to pull the heavy carriage myself, I crawled underneath it for shelter. The rain seeped through the wooden planks, drenching me to the bone as cold water trickled down. Just as another loud clap of thunder illuminated the dark sky, I spotted a shadowy figure approaching through the heavy rain. My heart sank as I realized I had left my gun at home to buy bricks. Drawing my short blade, I watched the approaching shadow until I recognized Meng Zi, drenched and clutching his gun. I called him under the carriage to take shelter. The space grew cramped, but Meng Zi laughed heartily at my runaway horse predicament. He pulled out a bottle of aged spirits he had traded for wild hares and we passed it back and forth to warm our freezing bodies. As we drank, a wild beast's roar echoed through the rain. Gripping my blade while Mang Z raised his gun, we crawled out to investigate and spotted a sow with 2 small piglets. However, following the unwritten rules of hunting, we refused to shoot a mother with young offspring and retreated under the carriage. Eventually, the heavy storm cleared into a breathtaking golden sunset. Soon, horse hooves thundered down the path as the village chief rode up on my runaway horse. Worrying for my safety, he had braved the muddy roads to search for me. Touched by his kindness, Mangzi and I thanked him, re-hitched the carriage, and drove home under the twilight sky. When we arrived, the green truck was parked in front of my house. Old Wang, the driver, and several helpful villagers were busy unloading the bricks. Apologetic about not being able to drive back to find me during the downpour, Old Wang declined my offer of drinks, explaining they needed to return early. However, the village chief insisted they stay at the brigade headquarters overnight until the muddy roads dried, so I offered to cook a feast for everyone. An hour later, the unloading was complete, and I served a lavish feast with Xiu Mei's domestic help. The table was set with braised wolf meat, pheasant stewed with hazel mushrooms, stir-fried aurelia shoots, steamed crayfish, and wild vegetable soup. Everyone gasped in awe, thoroughly impressed by my cooking, as they devoured the meal with loud praise. After dinner, the village chief led Old Wang, the driver, and the 2 masons to the brigade headquarters to sleep. As Xiu Mei and I cleared the dishes, our hungry pets emerged from the cabinet. I mixed formula for the tiger cubs and fed fresh meat to Chasing Wind. But just as the little ones began eating, Chasing Wind's ears suddenly twitched, and he raised his head, staring intensely out the window into the dark night. Chasing Wind suddenly went on high alert, his fur standing on end as he assumed an attack posture. Sensing an intruder in the yard, I blew out the candles, instructed Li Xiaomei to stay safely inside, grabbed my hunting rifle, and followed Chasing Wind into the pitch-black night. Chasing Wind led me to the backyard, where an animal had smashed a large hole straight through my newly woven willow fence. Deciding it was too dangerous to enter the dark woods, at night I called Chasing Wind back, temporarily patched the gap with cut branches, and returned to bed. At dawn, Chasing Wind and I searched the forest, but the midnight rain had washed away the animal's scent. When I returned empty-handed, Old Wang and his crew were ready to start construction. To build the new brick house, we first had to demolish the old mud brick one. The mason struck the foundation with a shovel, and with a loud rumble, the fragile old house collapsed into a cloud of dust. Nearby, villagers heard the noise and came over to help clear the debris, filling my courtyard with a lively, hard-working atmosphere. As we worked, a young man with a mud-stained face, stubble, and tattered clothes walked into the village and sat nearby. Looking closely, I realized he was only 17 or 18 years old. Curious, I walked over to chat. He introduced himself in a hoarse voice, explaining he had fled the severe famine in Shandong all alone. Taking pity on him, I offered to feed him if he helped with the construction. His eyes lit up, and he eagerly agreed. After I helped him wash up and gave him clean clothes, he proved to be remarkably strong, carrying 8 heavy bricks at a time stacked all the way to his chin. At lunchtime, I cooked a large pot of rich meat soup mixed with corn noodles. The appetizing aroma filled the yard, and I served the young man a big bowl. He wolfed it down, licking the bowl completely clean. Though I offered him a second helping, he politely declined, explaining that eating too much rich, oily food after months of starving would settle poorly in his stomach. Seeing that the house construction was well underway, I approached Mang Zi and suggested we go hunt the nest of wild boars the village chief had mentioned behind the mountain. Excited at the prospect of a big hunt, Mangza dropped his bowl, grabbed his rifle, and rushed me to get mine. As we headed off into the mountains together, the young Shandong refugee watched us go, his eyes flashing as he stared intensely at the guns in our hands. Mangzi and I arrived at the valley wasteland in less than half an hour. The area was dense with tall hazelnut trees, making it a perfect feeding ground for wild boars. As we carefully crouched along the animal tracks, a loud, thunderous cracking sound suddenly echoed through the brush. Mangzi gasped, realizing a massive herd of 20 to 30 boars was heading our way. We sprinted to a nearby red pine tree and agilely scrambled up the branches. Moments later, the herd burst into view, trampling weeds as they crunched on fallen hazelnuts. Leading them was a colossal alpha boar, twice the size of the others, with blood-red eyes and long, sharp fangs. Its hide was encased in a thick yellowish layer of hardened armor. Mangzi swallowed nervously and identified it as an armored pig. He explained that these intelligent alpha boars repeatedly rub against pine trees to coat themselves in resin and then roll in mud, creating a hard, bulletproof shell over time. Suddenly, the armored pig sensed us, let out a low growl, and glared straight up into our tree. At its command, the entire herd charged the red pine. They swarmed the base, gnawing furiously at the trunk with their sharp fangs. Wood chips flew as the tree began to shake violently. Knowing we would be eaten alive if the tree fell, I aimed at the armored pig's head and opened fire. The bullets struck its thick armor, creating sparks before harmlessly bouncing off. My shots only enraged the beast, causing it to bite into the trunk even harder. I quickly shifted my aim to the ordinary wild boars, killing 2, but others instantly took their place as the trunk grew dangerously thin. Desperate for a solution, I spotted a head-sized hornet's nest on a nearby elm tree. I immediately shot the branch holding the nest, sending it crashing to the ground. Thousands of furious wasps swarmed out and mercilessly stung the herd. The wild boars shrieked in pain and scattered frantically in all directions, trampling the hive as they fled. Luckily, the wasps ignored us up in the tree. Once the remaining bees dispersed, Mangzi and I climbed down and sprinted back to the village entrance. Sitting exhausted on the bridge, I told Mangzi that our only way to solve the wild boar problem was to figure out a way to eliminate that armored pig first. Since bullets could not pierce the armored pig's thick resin hide, I realized our best option was to build a deep trap filled with sharp wooden spikes. Mangzi agreed with the plan, but noted that digging a massive pit would require an extra hand. Not wanting to put the local militia or villagers in danger, I approached the young Shandong refugee, who was hard at work carrying heavy bricks. Recognizing his strength and resilience, I offered him a 20% share of the catch if he helped us. He agreed without hesitation. I bought 3 new shovels from the shop, and we headed straight into the valley forest. As we walked, I noticed the young man was remarkably calm, constantly scanning his surroundings with a hand resting near his waist. It was clear he was no ordinary refugee, but I kept my suspicions to myself to focus on the task. With the wild boars still scattered from the wasp attack, we worked undisturbed for 2 hours. By dusk, we finished digging a massive pit 5 meters deep and 8 meters wide. We buried thick, sharpened wooden spikes at the bottom, covered the opening with small branches and dirt, and scattered dead leaves on top to blend the trap into the terrain. To lure the boars, I tossed a handful of roasted corn kernels right into the center. Just as we finished, the Shandong refugee's eyes narrowed, warning us that something was coming. We quickly scrambled high into the trees to hide behind dense leaves. To my surprise, the young man pulled a broad-bladed kitchen knife from his waist, holding it with a specialized reverse grip that only experienced fighters use. Moments later, the herd returned, led by the armored pig. The leader let out a mournful howl over the 2 dead boars from our previous encounter. Suddenly, one of the boars caught the scent of the roasted corn and began walking directly toward our concealed trap. We held our breath from the treetops, our hearts pounding as the beast drew closer. The wild boar approached our trap, spotted the corn, and was about to step onto it, making us sigh at our bad luck. Suddenly, the armored pig sauntered over, shoved the smaller boar aside, and stepped directly onto the trap. With a loud thud, it plunged 5 meters down, its massive body pierced by 4 wooden spikes. As it howled and thrashing angrily, Mangzi accidentally shouted in excitement, revealing our location up in the red pine tree. Hearing the armored pig's warning roar, the herd swarmed the tree trunk, gnawing furiously. I yelled for Mangzi to ignite the pit. He pulled out a bottle of gasoline we bought from the brick truck driver, but as he fumbled nervously with his matches, the bottle slipped from his hands. It shattered right on top of the armored pig, soaking it in fuel. The enraged beast thrashed so wildly that it snapped the wooden spikes and began climbing up the walls of the pit. Panicked, I searched my clothes for matches, The young refugee handed me a box, but the strong forest wind kept blowing out the matchsticks. As the red pine tree began to sway precariously, I quickly plucked 2 dry, resin-coated pine cones from the treetop, lit them, and tossed them into the pit. The pine cones ignited the gasoline, instantly engulfing the armored pig in a roaring sea of fire. It struggled frantically until it finally collapsed, dead at the bottom. Leaderless and terrified by the flames, the herd broke down and scattered in all directions. We scrambled down the tree to hunt down the fleeing boars. I shot my rifle at the ankles of the nearest boar, breaking its forelegs and leaving it immobilized. I shouted for Mangzi to aim for their legs as well. Meanwhile, the young refugee sprinted through the jungle, leaped onto a wild boar's back, and expertly sliced its neck with his kitchen knife until it collapsed dead. However, the wild boar that Mangzi missed suddenly blindsided the young man, hitting him from behind. The beast's tusks snagged his clothes, carrying him blindly forward at full speed toward a massive tree. Seeing he was about to be crushed, I took aim and shot the boar's foreleg just in time. The wild boar collapsed, sending the young man tumbling forward. He rolled across the ground, struck his head hard against a tree trunk, and instantly lost consciousness. Mangzi and I rushed over to check on the young refugee, confirming he had only fainted from the impact. Mangzi slapped him across the face, bringing him back to consciousness. Sitting up, the man realized what happened and expressed his sincere gratitude to me. Mangzi praised his wild boar riding skills with a hilarious idiom, leaving us both chuckling. When the wounded wild boar tried to get up, the young man jumped forward and expertly slit its throat. He quickly bled out the dead boars, explaining that this prevents the blood smell from ruining the meat, a trick even experienced hunters like Mangzi had never heard before. Soon, a delicious, mouth-watering aroma filled the air. We approached the trap and found the armored pig roasted to a golden, crispy brown from the fire. While the inside was still raw, the skin was sizzling and fragrant. I sent Mangzi back to the village to gather people to help carry the catch, while the refugee and I stayed behind to clean and butcher the animals. Skillfully disemboweling the massive armored pig, the young man handed me a warm, freshly roasted piece of neck meat. The crispy skin and tender pork tasted incredible, even without seasonings. As we ate together in the pit, he revealed his name was Yang Fuyo. He had fled to the northeast from Yishui, Shandong, after tragedy struck his family's butcher shop, which explained his exceptional knife skills. Shortly after, Mangzi returned with over a dozen excited villagers carrying ropes and carrying poles. The group was thrilled by the massive haul of meat, happily tying up the boars and carrying them back toward the village. When we arrived, the 2 brickmasons were stunned into silence, unable to believe we had actually killed multiple giant wild boars. We carried our heavy catch directly to the supply and marketing cooperative. Grandpa Lee was just closing up shop when he saw us approaching. Chuckling at our impressive harvest, he warmly greeted us, marveling at the remarkably fat boars we had brought back from the mountains. With the help of the villagers, Grandpa Lee weighed the 3 well-preserved wild boars using a large steelyard. They came out to a total of 1,096 jin. Since wild boar meat sells for slightly less than domestic pigs, the price was set at 35 cents per jin. However, with the added 20% bonus commission, the price balanced out, and Grandpa Lee handed me 460 yuan in brand new 10 yuan banknotes. He jokingly marveled that I had made thousands of yuan in less than half a month, far out-earning the shop's monthly income. I invited Grandpa Lee to our house for an evening barbecue, but he politely declined due to family errands. I warmly thanked the helpful villagers and invited them all over to celebrate with a grand feast. A young village boy eagerly asked if I would teach him to hunt, and I promised to train him, once he grew older, if he proved willing to endure the hard work. Back at my yard, the village children peered eagerly over the courtyard wall as we prepped for the party. I instructed Mangzi and Yang Fuyo to gather thin willow branches for skewers. Using Third Master's razor-sharp short blade, I easily sliced the firm wild boar meat into mahjong-sized cubes. Everyone gathered around to thread the meat onto the sticks, sharing stories and laughter in a warm, harmonious atmosphere. I built a bonfire in the yard, lighting up the night. Once the flames settled into hot coals, I arranged the skewers around the fire. The dripping fat crackled in the embers, turning the pork into a glistening golden amber. A rich blend of roasted meat and charcoal smoke filled the air, making everyone's mouth water. I flipped the skewers, seasoning them with salt and chili powder until the aroma peaked. Handing the first skewer to an elder, I invited everyone to dig in. The villagers eagerly grabbed skewers and devoured the crispy, juicy pork, letting out groans of pure satisfaction. Watching from the top of the wall, the drooling children innocently wondered why the adults were making the exact same strange noises their parents made after night fights. Seeing the local kids drooling over the fence, I handed them 2 massive, sizzling meat skewers to share. The delighted children happily thanked me and devoured the food. Soon after, Aunt Chen rushed over to scold them for mooching food, but I assured her it was fine. She returned shortly with a basket of fresh wild vegetables for me and pulled me aside to warn me that Hu Biao was up to something and might try to cause trouble for me. After the full and satisfied villagers left, I kept Mangzi and Yang Fuyo behind to split our wild boar earnings. I counted out 2 equal shares of 180 yuan and handed them over. Mangzi happily accepted his, but Yang Fuyo tried to refuse, insisting he only did a small favor. I pushed the money into his hands, explaining that mountain hunting rules dictate everyone who helps gets an equal share. Deeply moved, he accepted the cash with trembling hands. I encouraged Yang Fuyo to settle down permanently in Meng family gully so we could hunt together. Thrilled by the idea, he handed his 180 yuan back, asking if I could help him buy an empty village house. I suggested he use the money to build a proper tile-roofed house instead, and he eagerly agreed. I then reminded Mangzi about his share from our previous wolf hunt, mentioning that the 2,000 yuan was split between him, third master, and me, and that my new wife was keeping the cash. Mangzi was shocked to learn I was already married at 18. I proposed that he build his own tile-roofed house in our village as well, so the 3 of us could live near each other and hunt together. Excited by the idea, Mangzi agreed immediately and generously offered to let Yang Fuyo borrow part of his share to build a larger house. Grateful for their camaraderie, Mangzi suggested that the 3 of us become sworn brothers. I readily agreed, but Yang Fuyo suddenly hesitated with a serious expression. Taking a deep breath, he told us he had a secret to confess first, leaving it up to us to decide if we still wanted him as a brother afterward. Before we could become sworn brothers, Yang Fuyo took a deep breath and insisted on revealing his past. He confessed that he hadn't fled Shandong due to famine, but to escape war and a terrible tragedy. Last summer, right after his wedding, the corrupt village chief's son and a gang of thugs broke into his home, beat him nearly to death, stole his dowry money, and kidnapped his new bride. Fueled by rage, Yang Fuyo sneaked into the chief's house at night with a knife and killed both the village chief and his son. Searching the storeroom, he discovered to his horror that his young wife had already passed away from the abuse. Driven mad by grief, he set the village chief's house on fire and fled north as a wanted fugitive, terrified of bringing trouble to us. Hearing his tragic story, Mangzi slapped his thigh in support, declaring that those wicked men got what they deserved. I reassured Yang Fuyo that since a year had passed and the house was reduced to ashes, authorities likely ruled it an accidental fire with no surviving evidence. Even if anyone came looking, he could easily hide deep in the mountain wilderness with us. Relieved that he no longer had to live in constant fear, Yang Fuyo finally smiled with genuine joy. Facing the east sky beside the campfire, the 3 of us knelt together on the ground. We swore an oath of brotherhood to share all blessings and hardships, pledging that while we were not born on the same day, we hoped to die on the same day. Since Mangzi was the oldest, he became our big brother. I was the second brother, being half a month older than Yang Fuyo, and Yang Fuyo became our third brother. As we chatted around the fire, Li Shumei walked into the yard carrying a flashlight, worried because I hadn't come home yet. Mangzi loudly greeted her as his new sister-in-law, teasing me for being so lucky. Yang Fuyo stepped forward and respectfully greeted her as well. I warmly introduced Yang Fuyo to Li Shumei, proudly telling her that the 3 of us were officially sworn brothers from this day forward. Li Shumei was thrilled to hear about our sworn brotherhood and urged my new brothers to take good care of me. After sending Mangzi and Yang Fuyo to rest at the brigade headquarters, I spent a peaceful night with Li Xiumei. The next morning, we slept in late until Mangzi and Yang Fuyo came shouting outside our gate. Mangzi teased me about my dark circles and dragged me off into the mountains without letting me eat breakfast, promising to find me something special. After a 20-minute walk, we reached a steep cliff face. Mangzi excitedly pointed to a patch of tender green plants with willow-like leaves and orange dots on the back. He introduced it as howling, a traditional herb used to boost male virility and treat kidney deficiency. When he insisted I drink it to regain my strength, I almost stumbled in disbelief, reminding him I was only 18 years old. Despite my protests, he persuaded me to start picking the fresh herbs with them. Since many plants grew high on the cliff, the three of us formed a human ladder, with Mangzi and Yang Fuyo holding me up so I could reach the higher leaves. Suddenly, a noise rustled in the nearby bushes. A skinny mother hare with swollen milk glands darted out and attacked me. I grabbed it by the neck, but it bit down hard on my sleeve. I quickly snapped its neck to end the struggle. Pushing the bushes aside with my rifle, I discovered a shallow burrow filled with a nest of newborn rabbit kits crying for food. Mangzi warned me that wild hares are notoriously delicate and impossible to raise in captivity. However, Yang Fuyo offered to try, mentioning he had successfully raised many litters back in his hometown. He expertly skinned the mother hare and wrapped the fragile newborns inside the warm fur to carry them home safely. After gathering the rest of the herbs, we returned to the village. I bought a small rubber nipple from the supply and marketing cooperative to feed milk formula to the tiny kits. As they greedily drank a whole bowl, I realized why others failed to raise wild hares. In these tough times, few could afford to feed precious milk powder to animals. After settling the rabbit kits, I checked on our new house. The villagers were building it fast, and it was already over a meter tall. I handed Universe brand filtered cigarettes to the two brick masons to thank them. Delighted with the premium cigarettes, they listened as I asked if they could stay longer after finishing my place. I explained that my two sworn brothers wanted to build two big tile-roofed houses as well. The masons were shocked at our village's sudden wealth, but I assured them they would be paid fairly, and they eagerly agreed to take on the extra work. Soon, the village chief walked into the yard with a big smile. He proudly shared that, during a meeting in the county town, the county magistrate commended our village for supplying so much meat and easing local shortages. As a reward, the county approved 20 brand new Chikihar rifles and 100 jin of rice for us. When he asked how to divide the reward, I told him to keep just 5 jin of rice for me and distribute the rest to the needy villagers. As for the weapons, I kept 1 rifle for myself and suggested holding the rest in the warehouse to set up a marksmanship test, giving new rifles only to militia members who prove their skill. Thrilled with the idea, the village chief pulled out a handful of orange segment candies he swiped from the county magistrate's office and gave them to me. I popped a piece into my mouth, savoring the nostalgic sweet and sour taste from my childhood. After thanking the village chief and watching him leave, I saved a few candies for myself and shared the rest with Mangzi and Yang Fuyo. As they happily chewed the sweet treat, I suddenly had a great idea and told them I had a plan that would let us eat candy every single day. I promised Mangzi and Yang Fuyo that we could eat delicious sweet treats every day, so I grabbed water buckets and led them deep into the mountains. Mangzi kept asking where we were going until I revealed my target, a half-person tall black bee nest packed with wild honey. Terrified, Mangzi tried to drag Yang Fuyo away, warning that Greater Kingan black bees carry deadly venom. Reassuring them that I knew what I was doing and had a safe plan, I led my cautious brothers over the hilltop. Suddenly, a ferocious roar echoed through the forest as trees snapped in the distance. A massive black shadow charged out, and Mangzi raised his gun to fight. However, I immediately grabbed them both and sprinted in the opposite direction. Trailing right behind the terrified bear was a dark, buzzing cloud of angry black bees. Recognizing the deadly swarm, Mangzi and Yang Fuyo sprinted ahead at full speed, leaving me at the back. No matter which way we turned, the frantic bear kept following right behind us, dragging the swarm along. Spotting a river running through the forest, I shouted for everyone to dive in. I jumped into the water and covered my head with my metal bucket to stay submerged. Mangzi and Yang Fuyo quickly jumped in beside me, imitating my trick. Seconds later, the bear crashed into the river with a massive splash. The angry black bees hovered above the water, buzzing frantically and occasionally bumping into our metal buckets. Inside my bucket, I felt a sudden swirl of water. Before I could react, a pair of large paws snatched my metal bucket right off my head and swam away with it. Stripped of my cover, I ducked underwater to avoid the bees and swam after the thief. Realizing I could not hold my breath much longer, I surfaced and squeezed into Mangzi's bucket. As I spat out river water and cursed at the bucket-stealing bear, I suddenly realized something strange. That bear actually looked remarkably familiar.